Representatives has been in place since at least 2000. It is difficult.
Okay, so today we're going to be predicting Kitty chapter 12. So first of all, just to get a better understanding on what the TCC is, let's take a look at this trailer. Kitty chapter 12 is going to be Power Command. Actually, it's going to be Power Patrol. Okay, so Power Patrol is the group of Okay, so today we're going to be predicting Kitty chapter 12. So first of all, just to get a better understanding on what the TCC is, let's take a look at this trailer. Kitty chapter 12 is going to be Power Command. Actually, it's going to be Power Patrol. Okay, so Power Patrol is the group of dogs that is being led by a boy named Ryder. Including him, there are 8 members. So guys, each and every pup has their own abilities and skills. So we're going to be going through each one at a time. So guys, this is Rocky and he recycles stuff. So he could take waste methods, recycle them, and fix broken objects. And guys, we have room.
Believe that a sudden and complete overhaul of the special education department is necessary at this worst of all possible moments to meet a requirement that has been in place for 18 years. I challenge this board and the special education administration to come up with a solution that does not involve eliminating the positions of the people our students rely on the most. You claim this new proposal will strengthen your ability to serve and support parents and students, but no one has asked parents or students what service and support they need. This is typical of the top-down administrative style that this school has adopted lately, and it is not working for parents or students. Along with a number of other parents and students, I ask that you go back to the drawing board and come up with a plan that resolves the technical compliance issue without removing the program chairs who are the heart and soul of this department. Thank you. What service and support they need. This is typical of the top-down administrative style that this school has adopted for parents or students. Along with a number of other parents and students, I ask that you go back to the drawing board and come up with a plan that resolves the technical compliance issue without removing the program.
Good evening, board members. Gail, thank you for putting this time in with us and doing the shit that is OPRF, keeping great records for all of us in the community. My name is Doug Gill. I've been in the school for about 15 years in the special education department. The program chairs are the true embodiment of teacher leadership. The positions serve as a source of collaboration and problem solving for any member of an IEP team. They understand the curriculum, the nuances, the logistics, the budgets, the data, and the criteria of the programs that they are responsible for. They lead with honesty, integrity, and transparency. In fact, any member of any team oftentimes collaborates with them to come up with creative solutions to various challenges that our students face. There are various voices, various spaces. Personally, I've spent many hours working closely with all of them, more so than any other year during this pandemic. They are the ones who I turn to for advice, answers to questions, and honest feedback about my classes and cases. Simply put, they are leaders. During this pandemic, it was the program chairs who checked on us, teachers and students, help teachers determine how to best serve students, and help teachers to ensure students' needs were met. They are the ones in the lead with teachers discussing individual kids and families. They are the ones on the phones with counselors using criteria to determine the appropriate personal aspect. One thing that's been made clear to me this time, that the role of the program chair is that our students deserve teacher leaders who have such strong values. This proposal clearly shows how out of touch that the current special education administration is with the day-to-day needs of our students and special education staff. Program chairs are not quasi-administrators. They're the servant leaders that all of OPRF benefits. One thing that's been made clear to me this time, that the role of program chair is that our students deserve teacher leaders who are such strong values. This proposal clearly shows how out of touch that the current special education administration is day-to-day. Program chairs are not quasi-administrators. They're the servant.
Good evening, and thanks very much for listening. My name is Kristen Charco, and I'm here in opposition to the proposed special education leadership restructuring. My son Ben is a senior in the team program, and the team is one of the 4 special ed programs that would lose their program chair under this proposal. Can't imagine a worse time for restructuring in special education. Our new executive director has been here for less than a year to get experience even a day of regular operations. Our students have their school lives unattended. To prioritize administrative oversight at this time is hard to understand. I mentioned earlier, my son Ben is in team. Fawn Joyce is the team program chair. Fawn is a shining light for her students. She is passionate about their well-being and progress, and a remarkable leader and team builder for her staff. Her incredibly strong connections throughout OPRF and throughout the community will help her students to have opportunities to engage with their non-disabled peers that otherwise wouldn't exist. OPRF can be a really big place, even bigger for students with disabilities. This fond support and understanding enables her students to engage just fully as anyone. To suggest that the elimination of the program chair positions and the effective demotion of these individuals is not negative because they can return to the classroom and or apply for new positions is dismissive of their long service and incredibly valuable contributions. I heard no mention of who would become those roles, and to expect that case managers would do it, presumably without a reduction in their teaching responsibilities and additional focus on those. In addition to being a parent, I'm also a school lawyer, and most of my practice is in special ed. So I read with interest the reason for this restructuring was that program chairs couldn't satisfy the role of an LEA representative. And I know what that means. I know what they're required to do. And under the board agenda, it says that the problem is that they can't meet the Illinois requirements, which are that LEA reps have to be able to commit district resources and also to ensure implementation of IEP services. But I don't understand why program chairs can't do that. In fact, there's federal guidance that expressly says that an LEA rep does not have to be an administrator. As your special education students begin to transition to something like normalcy, they don't need additional layers of administrative oversight. They need the highly dedicated and capable program chairs who have known and supported them throughout. Thanks very much. LEA reps have to be able to commit district resources and also to ensure implementation of IEP. But I don't understand why program chairs can't do that. In fact, there's federal guidelines expressly said that LEA reps do not have to be an administrator. As your special education students begin to transition.
Good evening, board members, and thank you so much for providing this opportunity to discuss the new special education proposal. I am Fawn Joyce, and I'm one of the program chairs. I have proudly been an employee here for 14 years. I was a team teacher for 7 years and a program chair for Team Insight for the last 7. I ask administration what urgency there is in drastically changing a system that is currently working. This pandemic has affected everyone significantly. Next year will be a rebuilding year to get students back in the building and on track. This top-down decision-making did not include any input from stakeholders, which will surely impact student growth. The proposed leadership structure outlines the roles for administrators to work in silos, which will sterilize the relationship with teachers, students, and families. Proposed isolation of administrative duties will force disconnected administrators to work in compartments, one hand not knowing what the other hand is doing. The current model works because it provides continuity. It takes specialized teams to help students and families during these difficult times. We work with teachers, related service providers, TAs, counselors, and secretaries to be creative and determined in meeting student needs. We work with our programmatic teams using relationships that we've built over time. Some of those moving parts that will be lost is the off-campus program chair who works with therapeutic day schools and staff. The SED program chair who works with social workers, behavior interventionists, and GBT specialists. The site program chair who works with Rush Hospital and the transition specialist. The LD with general education and inclusion facilitator. Program chairs work with each other in developing what is best for individual students. We have created severity matrices for the hybrid plan, the continuum of services and master schedules for our programs. We work with and evaluate TAs by program. We work with the junior high so students have a successful start to high school. And we are the LEA for our students' IEPs. Administrators with entrenching defined roles will be unable to do this as they will be specialized in our continuum of services. We know our programs, we know them well. We have taught in them, and we know the students from 8th grade to beyond graduation. We need to support our students and families, not make things more difficult in a time where things are very difficult. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of building trust and nurturing relationships to focus on helping students. Program chairs have bridged the gap between teachers and administrators. If you cut these supports out, there will just be more padding between administration, who essentially makes decisions, and students who should be the focus of all of our efforts. Students need support, families are asking for help. Please reconsider this plan and elicit input from those stakeholders. Thank you. Things are very difficult. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of building trust and nurturing relationships to focus on helping students. Program chairs have bridged the gap between teachers and administrators. If you cut these supports out, there will just be more padding between administration, who essentially makes decisions. Students who should.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to weigh in on the same topic. My husband and I were shocked and disappointed by the correspondence from Ms. Francois Blue stating that she was planning to restructure the special education department by eliminating the roles of the program chairs and increasing administrative positions. The program chairs are important conduits between the families who have students in special education and the administration. They have personal knowledge of the students and understand how to best serve the students within the special ed structure. Lauren Joyce has been a tremendous resource to advocate for our son Eddie. Her personal knowledge of his needs and his strengths, combined with her understanding of the structure of special education department and the general education curriculum, have made her an irreplaceable asset during his IEP meetings and issues that have arisen each year. Adding 3 new administrators will likely be just one more layer between the families and the director of special education. It is unrealistic to believe that administrators will have the opportunity to the opportunity or interest to learn about the students and their individual needs. Ms. Francois Blue stated that the new administrators, quote, would allow us to better fulfill the role of the local education agency representatives at IEP meetings, as well as optimize and increase administrative supervision and oversight that strengthens their ability to serve and support students and parents. My husband and I questioned how new school staff who actually know the students will better fulfill the ability to quote, serve and support the individual student as is necessary in an individual education plan. In addition, I imagine the cost of adding 3 administrators will increase the budget. Is this what we want to be doing in a year that has caused financial stress throughout our community? Finally, Ms. Francois Blue was welcomed into our community at a unique time. She has not had the opportunity to get to know the people she is serving or the staff she represents. It appears to be a misguided act to change the system that she has not had the ability to observe and truly judge what works and what does not for people who she does not know. My husband and I strongly disagree with the restructuring of the special education department. We request that the present program we request that the program chairs remain in their current positions. Thank you.
Come on, line. Corrine Pardon?
Good evening, board members. Thank you for having us here. I'm going to read a statement from my daughter, Emma Mascaro-Romine. She dictated it to me last night. She said, "My name is Emma Mascaro-Romine. I graduated from OPRF and SITE. I have an intellectual disability and anxiety. We need people like Miss Joyce. She helps people with disabilities. She has a calming voice. Being in team and SITE helped me get out of my comfort zone. Making the special education department smaller will not help anyone." And to add on to her words, my name is Corinne Romine. I'm Emma Romine's mom. She graduated from OPRF and SITE in 2020, right before the pandemic started. I cannot overstate the impact of all the team programs as well as SITE. The classes and teachers, along with the program chairs, especially Fawn Joyce, they increased her confidence in her academic skills in a way that an inclusion general education class just would not have done. Yes, I do want my daughter to interact with all kinds of people, but at the end of the day, her friends that she goes to the movies with and the teachers here who helped her write a resume and practice her job interviews, they came from team, they came from SITE, and also included Ms. Joyce. Please don't restructure this program now. I strongly believe, and I ask you that the program chairs not be taken away. Thank you.
Good evening. Here to speak on the restructuring proposal for special education. As we look to build a positive community here at OPR-FHS, a community of warmth, top-down and unilateral decisions do not build a cohesive department, school community, and therefore hurt our community at large, and most importantly, our students. As educators, we are asked every single day to make data-driven decisions. When I look at this proposal, I don't see the data behind the decision-making. And again, that lack of interest and understanding of the data or even proposing it hurts student success. At this point, more than ever, we are asked to meet students where they are. And it's important to know so that we can support the students as best as possible. With zero communication between special education staff, program chairs, with the administration, I'm confused how this helps students and supports them the best. We need to think about how destructive this move would be for our school community, and again, our community as a whole. The program chairs are in every facet of this school. They help support case managers, teachers, and again, as you've heard and you will continue to hear all evening, they help support students be successful here at OPR-FHS and beyond. We go to support as case managers and teachers to our program chairs because we can't get very many straight answers from our current special education administration. The data to add more admin to this department does not support that decision. We can't get straight answers. We have to utilize our program chairs. Adding more admin, again, creates more distance between the administration and the teachers. Therefore, again, impacting student success. A few people have touched on the language surrounding LEAs. And I just want to read this quickly. So the actual law states that the LEA representative at meetings must have the authority to make commitments to the provisions and resources and able to ensure the services set out in the IEP will be implemented. The law does not indicate that that person needs an administrative certificate. It does not indicate that they need to be a school administrator. This is not the right decision at this time. the fact that there's no dialogue and no connection at all between the decision-making powers that be and the people that are on the ground every day is ridiculous. Thank you.
Second, while we check to see if there's anyone else who signed in for public comment. Okay, we will now. Do you want to make a comment? Come on up, please.
I submitted in writing, but
Okay, if you're here and you want to say it, that's.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Renee Rogatori, and I am the parent of a current freshman, a junior, as well as an OPRF alum. I'm here tonight to urge the board to reject the proposed restructuring of the special education department. This plan would eliminate 4 crucial program chair positions and create a massive void for so many students, caregivers, parents, and teachers. For the more than 17% of OPRF students who receive services at the high school, the program chairs are so much more than their role of IEP facilitator. They are literally the heart and soul of the special education program. They develop connections with each student within the program and understand their individual strengths and challenges. They provide support and resources to students and work tirelessly to ensure that OPRF is a welcoming and inclusive community. I know that I speak for many special ed parents when I say that our program chairs have been an absolute lifeline to survival during this pandemic year. Our program chair has helped us navigate technology issues, scheduling issues, learning resources, social connections, and so much more. Our program chair has been a phone call or email away, always listening to our frustrations or concerns. For our freshman who is in the teen program, who has been filled with tremendous anxiety over transition to a new school, our program chair has created a welcoming and inclusive atmosphere in the most challenging of times. Going forward, the program chairs will be even more essential as we come to understand the academic, social, and emotional impact of the pandemic on our students. Their role will be essential as these students return to in-person connections and will undoubtedly require complex supports to meet their needs. The role will be essential as we welcome new 8th graders in the transition process to the special education program. Their role will be essential as many in the special education space will be displaced with further construction this fall. This is absolutely the worst time to force through a massive change without taking all of these considerations into account. I hope that the board and administration can solicit and listen to input from special education parents, students, and teachers in this process. I hope that the board and administration can find a more creative solution to meet the needs of the district without eliminating such a fundamental and vital support for one of our school's most vulnerable populations. Let's get this right. Thank you.
Sure. Is there anybody else here who wanted to make public comment in person? Yeah, if you want to just come on up one by one, you can.
I thought I did it right.
Good evening. My name is Heidi Lynch. I'm a counselor here. I have been at Oak Park North Forest High School for over 25 years as a teacher, as a counselor, and now recently as a parent. And one thing that I've learned from my many years here is that relationships are the heart of this place. We never get anything done well or effectively when we are not connecting with each other and using each other to solve problems. I would say that our program chairs are the absolute embodiment of that spirit. They are the nexus between all of the stakeholders. So to see the parents here, to see Corinne and Emma, to see Christina, who I got to hear how Jada's doing at school, to talk to Kristen this morning as she was dropping Ben off at school. That just shows you the love and the connection that our families and our students have to this issue and to this particular And my brother's calling me, sorry. It just shows you the connection that people have to special education, to the support that we have. And so our program chairs really truly are that link. Our program chairs are teachers. They've all taught in their program. They're specialists in their programs. And Lindsay Kirby is the embodiment of kind, calm, consistent stability. She's the perfect representative for SED. I sat in a staffing last week with Fawn where we haven't been able to visit the middle schools this year, obviously. We did a transition staffing and Fawn said, well, I remember you from 7th grade. And that just made that family feel all the more connected. Counselors, as my role is, spend all kinds of time relying on the expertise of these really incredibly thoughtful, smart, knowledgeable women. I have seen over my many years just the growth of this connection between teachers and program chairs and families by the explosion of programs. We have adapted PE, we have adapted art, we have adapted food. That comes out directly as a result of our program chairs understanding the needs of their students and making it work in the school in a collaborative way. I ask that, what problem are we trying to solve? We've heard about LEAs and it seems like there's some alternate interpretations. Why not? Why are we trying to solve? What problem are we trying to solve? My hope is that if we have a problem, we would solve it collaboratively rather than through a top-down approach and use the inspiration of our program chairs who are indeed the embodiment of a collaborative relationship.
Anyone else physically present who would like to make public comment? Yes, come on up, please.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Hall. I am the grandmother and guardian of a junior who uses services in the special education department here. I am deeply concerned about the proposal to eliminate team managers from the Department of Special Education and replace them with administrators. While I have no doubt that these administrators will provide value to those already charged with the sometimes daunting task of running such a large department, I fail to see how they will compensate for the loss of 4 highly skilled team managers. Before any changes are made, we need clear answers to the following questions. In what ways will the restructuring promote academic achievement, significant progress toward IEP goals, or student morale? How will the new configuration counterbalance the loss of collaboration, shared innovation, and counsel resulting from the loss of team managers? And what specifically are the objectives of restructuring, and how will the success of the new configuration be measured? Unless these questions are answered, the plan should not be approved. Until there is input from the parents of these most vulnerable students, the plan should not be approved. If the administration of the special education department cannot provide specific examples of harm caused by the current structure of the department, the plan should not be approved. I understand that a strong leader may want to implement strategies that may have proven successful in other contexts. This is commendable, but only if the new strategy is needed. And I am not convinced that this is the case. There is more than one road to success, and it appears that we're on one. Why can't a program manager be a designated LEA representative? Why should a team be denied leadership that has already demonstrated its value? Why should we replace people with boots on the ground with people whose time will be divided between the office and classroom observation? I would much prefer to see adjustments to what we are doing rather than the wholesale abandonment of a system with a proven track record. I believe that anything else would be a waste of time, energy, and resources.
Do we have any additional folks in person? We do have a significant amount of public comment that was emailed, so we will begin with that now.
Okay, our first one is from Sarah Millman, members of the board. I'm submitting this public comment to urge you not to remove the current public program chairs in special education and replace them with administrative positions. My son transitioned this year to OPR from Julian and Fawn Joyce. One of the program chairs has a lifeline for our family. My son is a very complicated individual as he is autistic with a developmental disability. In addition, he has a medical condition, cystic fibrosis. Before we even begin the process of transitioning to OPRF, I met Fawn through presentations she organizes for the disability community. Navigating various agencies and life situations with a child who is severely disabled is extremely complex. And Fawn has consistently organized wonderful and helpful speakers to help educate parents on these issues. This parental education that Fawn does is critical to parents. Transitioning my son into OPRF during a pandemic when the school is closed could have been a nightmare. He has so many needs that are difficult to make transition in the best of time. Fawn started participating at the very beginning of his transition and her confidence, hard work, and kind personality turned what could have been a nightmare into a smooth and positive experience for him. There have been dozens of issues that could have come up either due to his autism or medical condition, and I began to understand right away that Fawn responds promptly and does whatever she can do in order to help fix, adjust the situation. Everything from a busing schedule, which was problematic due to how much time his breathing treatments take in the morning, to scheduling and picking classes for students who does not fall neatly into an academic category, to working with all of his teachers and his aide to ensure that he is being educated effectively, to small accommodations like finding a spot for him to have a short snack midday when he is in person. His nutritional needs are different due to his CI. The list goes on, and she's been critical in helping us feel comfortable and assured that my son is receiving the best education as possible at this time. OPRS has a massive special education staff. From a parent's perspective, when it really comes down to the actual experience of special education at OPRF, there has been one singular person who truly made a difference for our family, and that is Fawn Joyce. As you can imagine, I have been involved with countless individuals over the course of my child's life due to his developmental and medical complexities. Fawn stands out as the absolute top of professionals in terms of her confidence, her effectiveness, and her compassion. It would be a huge loss for my family and for OPRF to remove Fawn from her current position, which is what I would call a lifeline position for my son and our family. I ask you to please consider removing Fawn and the program chairs from their positions. These program chairs are absolutely essential for the day-to-day well-being of our special education. From Vanessa and Donovan Anderson. First and foremost, I want to say that this is a very shameful thing to even think about cutting Miss Fawn Joyce, Joyce Fawn, sorry, from OPRF. Fawn is invaluable. She is most understanding and has been a comfort for me and a helper to my son, Donovan. I understand the physical and emotional demands of working with children and to have the perfect blend of patience, energy, compassion, and responsibility. But she tops it off with a dose of genuine love. In addition, she has excellent listening and verbal communication skills to effectively work with parents and their challenged children. She is very thoughtful, even off the clock, as I was ill. She called me and checked on me during my week's stay in the hospital. She's like a rare diamond, very irreplaceable. Speaking for my son and I, we would be overjoyed she was allowed to stay. This is from Jennifer Manning. Good evening. I'm the parent of an incoming freshman who will be placed in a team setting in the fall. I'm writing to express a concern about the proposed change in the program chair positions within the special education department. Please accept this as a public comment. We had our son's transition meeting last Tuesday, and a new meeting is anticipated in team. In particular, we were impressed with Ms. Joyce, who I had the pleasure of speaking with in advance of the meeting, and who facilitated our transition meeting. She was very positive, encouraging, excited to meet our son and us, and reassuring. It's a challenging moment for any student coming into a new building and learning environment, and it's scary for us parents, especially when the son has multiple and complex special needs. Imagine our shock when the very next day we learned from Facebook that there is a plan afoot to remove all of the current program chairs and return them to the classrooms, and that this plan is to be approved on March 11th. Very, very disconcerting, to say the least. Several things about this concern is, one, we found out indirectly. Two, there's no clear reason or explanation for this proposed change. Three, it's a wholesale demotion, house cleaning of what we hear are very experienced, successful, and dedicated staff. Why? Putting them back into teaching roles, presumably get pushed out. So does this mean that my son's teacher will be potentially an entirely different person after we just spent 2 hours reviewing his needs with someone we were led to believe would be his teacher? Five, the program chair will have the opportunity to apply for the position. Sounds like a slap in the face by everything. Why didn't we get it in? Apply?
Hold on 1 second, please. We're having some audio trouble. Adjust the volume here.
Test 1 2, testing 1 2, testing 1 2.
Testing. All right. So I'll start with 5. These demoted program chairs will have an opportunity to apply for the new positions. It sounds like a slap in the face if I ever heard one. Why remove them if they can apply? You risk losing a lot of very valuable staff, your biggest asset. The staff were quite completely unawares of this new plan, and therefore this plan did not include any discussion with or feedback from students, parents, teachers, other related services, staff, or other administration. I hope that you as the board will make every attempt to fully understand this bizarre and unexplained proposed plan and insist that the new executive director of special education make every effort to include all stakeholders in the problem identification and exploration of solutions before accepting this proposed plan. Many thanks. The next one is from Christine Nelson. I request all board members remind her. She's asking, what metrics are being used to justify this change? Are they industry standard? Were the data collected pre-COVID? The rather anemic survey sent out by the SPED staff department is hardly likely to justify this. How have those metrics been used by other school systems to justify these changes? Did they hold up in post-implementation monitoring? Was there a statistically significant improvement in the running of the departments at 6, 12, and longer time periods after implementation? If this approach has not been successfully implemented in multiple districts, I am willing to have my child be part of this experiment here. I am unwilling to have my child be part of this experience here. Where were the focus groups of parents, caregivers? I was not asked to participate. Surely all parents should have been asked. What size were they? And how often do they meet? What were the questions asked? What other alternatives have other schools used to improve upon the aforementioned metrics besides upending the entire department? What other solution options are available? And if not chosen, why not?
From Katie Renner. Per the letter dated March 5th from Ms. Francois Blue, I would like to ask that the board ask more questions about how adding more administrative roles will better serve the special education department before approving these changes. As a parent of a sophomore in the teen program, I cannot understand how this is being proposed as a positive restructuring. I would also like to understand if there's an addition of 4 teachers, the current program chairs. Will that mean that 4 non-tenured special education teachers will be dismissed? Will this also mean that the case managers or teachers will take on the additional responsibilities of the current program chairs? The program chairs work hand in hand with staff and families to navigate the complicated special education services with the student success as the main goal. I've never had an interaction with anyone in an administrative role that I didn't initiate. This proposed new role with higher level of approvals power seems to have the budget and district's best interest in mind, not the success of the students. Natalie Anders and Haywood Kelly. As the parents of a sophomore at OPRF who receives special education services, we are concerned about the recent announcement from the OPRF Executive Director of Special Education, Mrs. Francois Blue, regarding the complete restructuring of the special education department, which includes the elimination of the program chair positions. We have a host of concerns, which include, number 1, Ms. Francois Blue's short tenure at OPRF High School, given the magnitude of the change she's proposing. Ms. Francois Blue has been in a role at OPRF for less than a year, and that year can be accurately characterized as highly unusual and chaotic. Respectfully, Ms. Francois Blue doesn't know our students and hasn't seen the way the program chairs interact with and support them. So it's difficult for us to see how her recommendation could be based on careful observation and consideration of the needs of students and their families. Number 2, the elimination of the program chair roles will effectively remove one of the most important coaches our daughter has had on her team during her time at OPRF. Vaughn Joyce, the team program chair, has been an invaluable resource. She has helped our daughter and family navigate OPRF, advocated for our daughter during a challenging period of resource support, and has been a tireless booster for all diverse learners. Most importantly, she knows our daughter, acknowledges her humanity, and values the contributions she makes to OPRF. During this difficult, almost completely virtual year, she has been one of the few consistent points of contact from OPRF for our family. The lack of clarity around how this change will improve the situation for diverse learners at OPRF. In the past, OPRF administrators, including Dr. Pruitt Adams and Ms. Francois Blue's predecessor, have expressed a commitment to creating more opportunities for inclusive education at OPRF. We aren't opposed to changes in special education department structure that are clearly aimed at bringing the school up to par with others in the Chicagoland area who provide meaningful opportunities for inclusive education for diverse learners. However, Ms. Francois Blue's announcement only provides information about the benefits of this change to the OPRF team. Restructuring would allow us to better fulfill the role of a local education agency, LEA, representative at IEP meetings, as well as optimize and increase administrative supervision and oversight. We have played an active role in our daughter's education over the years and have been willing advocates for change when it's clear that it benefits all diverse learners. However, we have not been encouraged by the way that OPRF has supported diverse learners during the pandemic and by Ms. Francois Blue's recent announcement. We strongly suggest that the administration conduct a more thorough review of roles and responsibilities under more typical circumstances and seek feedback from students and families regarding the strengths and challenges of the current structure before implementing such changes. From Jill Shipley Ricks. We cannot imagine the special ed department without the incredibly helpful people like Vaughn Joyce. Our family can always count on her for correct information and answers to our questions. She is a lifesaver and cares so much for all of our students. Why would you make such a drastic change, eliminating all program chairs, when this particular area of the department is so helpful to so many families? We do not like changes being forced upon us. It's not right. We all strive to protect and surround our kids with caring, comforting individuals. We live in this community specifically for the quality of the special education program. Do not change what is obviously working for this community. From Trina Bacchus. Dr. Pruitt Adams and members of the Board of Education, I'm dismayed by proposal to reorganize the special education department, replacing the 4 program chairs, 3 administrators, and an IEP coordinator. Both of my children have graduated from OPRF. My younger daughter utilized special education services and graduated in August 2020. She had an off-campus placement, and we worked extensively with Lauren Achura, one of the affected program chairs. I will address Ms. Chura and the role she plays in a minute, but first I want to address a more general issue. It's hard to see how funneling the needs of existing families and students to 3 administrators versus 4 subject matter experts is going to better serve students and families, especially as we continue to move through a time that is causing increased mental health issues among teens. The special education department should be planning on how to serve more families with perhaps more complex needs coming out of this year of isolation, loss of routine, and varied disruptions, including economic insecurity and possible loss of family members. Families and students rely on the program chairs to help navigate the special education system at OPRF community. In the case of site and on-campus placements, the program chairs are the experts. They are the human face of the special ed process for students and families. Having been at numerous 504 and IEP meetings over the course of my children's education, I understand that there is a large administrative component to the 504 IEP process and to the meetings. However, I do not believe that improving the administrative efficiency of the process should come at the cost of the human component of the process. The parents that deal with off-campus placement and have worked or are working with Ms. Chura are often in difficult situations, sometimes in outright crisis. Her knowledge and ability to guide the process, understand options, and work with families should not be underestimated. Families and students rely on people, not simply processes, and removing the people at this time of increased needs seems short-sighted. Yes, Ms. Chura was and would be an excellent classroom teacher, and I believe that would be a waste of her value to this community. I haven't worked as extensively with the other program chairs, but I think their value to the constituency is just as great. I hope the Board of Education does not approve this request. Sincerely, T. Kathleen Holt. Good evening. I'm running in support of the program chair positions. I'd like to start by saying for some students and families, the high school experience is less traditional because of the services the child receives as a part of their IEP. For my sons, this has been the case as they are off-campus students. As a result, it's very normal to feel unconnected to the Oak Park High School experience in general. Therefore, the relationship with the program chairs is crucial in allowing families to have consistency and predictability during the years of high school, and also providing that connection and link to feeling like we too belong to the OPRF. For my family in particular, that relationship has been with Lauren Chura. Having Lauren's guidance, expertise, and caring attitude during periods of placement, maintenance of a placement, and periods of transition have been priceless. Lauren's knowledge in all of the legal and state guidelines and making sure placements and IEPs were on point has been crucial. I always come to the IEP meetings knowing that my sons and our family were in good hands with Lauren. And that has always been a huge relief as a parent. Also of importance to note is that for many of us, the services our children receive extend beyond the traditional 4 years of high school. Knowing that we had Lauren there to support us in the post-high school years was so important to us. And finally, the relationship with programs and the depth of knowledge that Lauren has with the schools and programs all over the state and country is remarkable. That's not something that can be easily or quickly established. Lauren's professional, calm, knowledgeable, and caring attitude left me feeling reassured in meetings, but also enabled her to communicate and work with all different people from so many different schools and programs. To sum it up, Lauren has provided a sense of connection for us as we navigate the high school years in a more non-traditional manner. It's hard to imagine a future day when I can't reach out by phone or email and get a quick response from Lauren to hear her guidance and get her help on issues that arise from off-campus placements. I ask the board to consider the years that have gone into her forming relationships and knowledge she brings to families who have a less traditional high school experience before taking that away. Thank you.
From Jeffrey Charco. In a year that has been difficult for everyone, as is often the case, individuals with disabilities are impacted most significantly. Now, with the vague allusions to unspecified evolving demands in the special education program, the administration has suggested that elimination of special education program chairs is required in the midst of a pandemic because they have not been granted the authority necessary to fulfill the role of an LEA representative set forth by the Illinois State Special Education Regulations. There is no explanation of why that authority could not be granted to the special education program chairs. Nor is there no indication or analysis of how frequently, if ever, additional district resources are required to be committed as part of the IEP process for individual students. Indeed, there is no indication that the replacement role of IEP coordinator has the authority claimed to be lacking by the special education program chairs. This is particularly troubling here, where one of the individuals that is to be eliminated is Fawn Joyce. Ms. Joyce has been a ray of sunshine for many parents of special education students. During the pandemic, time and time again, Ms. Joyce went out of her way to do what was best for the students, notwithstanding the fact that the newly installed special education director failed to provide her with adequate resources. It is ironic that the need to replace her is based on the lack of authority to provide students with the resources required to meet the students' IEP goals. In almost 8 years of experience in IEP meetings with her, Ms. Joyce has been an empathetic voice, and more importantly, for present purposes of problem solving. Even when she did not have actual authority to accomplish what was required, she did everything she could to try to make it happen. She is highly skilled at her job, has a long history in this school, and has connections to the community that cannot be replaced. There appears to be no analytical basis to conclude that the revised plan will serve to provide additional or adequate resources to meet students' IEP goals. There appears to be no material cost savings. There is no explanation of why the existing personnel could not be accommodated in the new positions created, or what the evolving demands in the special education program are, other than new director wanting to terminate highly skilled employees to install her own team. Ms. Joyce is too valuable to the school, her students, and the parents to let this happen. Marinelli Bassett Dillon. Big changes up in special ed administration should include the views and experiences and experienced staff as well as parents, because we have a lot of information about very individualized needs of students. From Becca Kaufman and Peter Shawman. Dear Superintendent Pruitt Adams, President Spivey, and members of the District 200 BOE. I am writing with great concern about the seemingly sudden and drastic changes being made to the special education department by Director Shirley McFrancois Bloom. We are parents of students with an IEP. Our chair, Lindsay Kirby, has been our lifeline as we have navigated the complex needs of our child and the rules and guidelines of OPRF in the state. Lindsay always provides answers, even if the answers aren't the ones we want to hear. She is the conduit between a very large team where specific answers are hard to come by between parents, students, counselors, teachers, case managers, social workers, doctors, therapists, evaluators, and administrators. Anytime we've had to try and move up the ladder, answers rarely come. Does the department need change? Without a doubt. Ideally, change would mean more students and family support and less red tape and hoop jumping. Change would mean better programs and resources for all special education students, with classes that meet not only their educational needs, but social emotional needs as well. From my vantage point and my daughters, we sorely lack that at OPRF. But all change should include input from the stakeholders and be done in a slow and thoughtful way. Without that process, it feels reckless, even more so after a year that we have all experienced. Thank you for your consideration and for your service. From Mr. Oscar Medina, I am writing to object to the proposed restructuring of the special education department. This pandemic has been a challenge for everyone, but the special ed needs students require consistency. Fawn Joyce has helped our daughter model the past 4 years at OPRF, and currently while navigating her transition into the SITE program. Fawn has made this episode seamless. It would be difficult if additional transitions would be in place. I hope that the administration and the board can come up with some other plan that will meet the district needs without depriving us of our program chair. From Tina Baird. I am writing in opposition of the proposed dismissal of the 4 department chairs in the special education department. It is not in the best interest of the students to remove the passionate people who have developed and built those important programs that have proven to be beneficial. It is not in the best interest of the students to remove the passionate people that have built an important and reliable relationship with individual students and their families. I trust that the board members will hear these concerns and make a decision that is in the best interest of the students receiving the special education services. From Sandra Shamishka. My comments are in response to the letter from Ms. Francois Blue and recommendations to restructure the leadership of the department. I'm against this restructure, and I am against reassigning current program chair, Ron Joyce. My son Dylan is a junior in team at OPRF. He is funny, he is bright, he is also autistic and OCD. When you see him in the halls at OPRF HS, you'll notice his wonderful smile as he skips to his next class. What you won't know as he's walking by is that he has OCD and how it affects his day. You won't know how his excitement from seeing the bus outside at the end of the school day causes him to lose focus, or how he needs to have the same conversation with the teachers each day, causing a delay in learning. The only way you can know this about Dylan is if you interacted with him daily or spoke to me, his mother, or often Vaughn Joyce. She would know this. Vaughn Joyce knows Dylan. Vaughn Joyce knows me. From what I understand, the proposed new administrative positions wouldn't be interacting with Dylan on a daily basis. Having an administrator that has no daily contact with my son or me is not serving his needs. Vaughn Joyce, however, does have daily contact with Dylan and could be reached by me by passing along a concern or suggestion. She would understand because she interacts with my son every day. How can someone that doesn't witness a student's strength and challenges have a voice in any matter that concerns this student? In order to help Dylan, you must witness his behavior during the school day and engage with him up close, not from afar. I trust Vaughn Joyce because she sees Dylan's needs firsthand and takes this time to understand Dylan. I would like Vaughn Joyce to remain a program chair. I ask that the current program chairs maintain their current positions and not be reassigned to teachers. Thank you.
From Glenn Samashima. I am a parent of a special education student at OPR FHS, and with regards to Mrs. Francois Blue's recommendation to restructure the leadership of the department, I'm strongly against this change for the following reasons. One, there has been no demonstrated justification for why a change is needed. What metrics will be improved by the recommended changes? Two, I am disappointed that if a deficiency was identified, why wasn't parent input solicited before a fully formed recommendation was made? Was there an examination of alternatives? Why this leadership structure? And why not let the current program chairs fill these roles by default? Three, I am concerned that the overall quality of the student's educational experience will suffer from such a massive restructuring. Many of our children like routines, and even seemingly minor changes can have major impacts on their emotional well-being and behavior. One of the program chairs affected is volunteering.
If I could please ask everybody in the room to turn down that volume if they're tuned into the web session, and to make sure they're muted.
One of the program chairs affected is Vaughn Joyce. My wife and I have worked with her since my son was 8th grade.
Here we go. I got it.
It's muted now.
One of the program chairs affected is Vaughn Joyce. My wife and I have worked with her since our son's 8th grade transition meeting. She is as hardworking, caring, and driven as any educator we have worked with since our son started many years ago in the early childhood program in District 97. I do not understand the need to change her job status when she's done a wonderful job as program chair. It is shameful that she is being demoted in a restructuring that has not been explained except in a one-page letter. Does it not make sense for her to fill one of the newly created special education supervisor or IEP coordinator positions and not have to go through an interview process? I'm very surprised that this recommendation was put forth with Mrs. Francois Blue having less than a year's experience with the department. And that experience has taken place during a pandemic without the benefit of seeing the department perform during a typical school year. It seems reckless and premature for a leader to call for a significant change to a school special education department during a pandemic with mostly online learning after only 8 months. From Leslie Sutton. I have read that 20 classroom renovations have been removed from the plans for phase 1 of Imagine. The estimated cost for these classrooms is $1.4 million. I also heard on Facebook that the D200 budget has a surplus of $2 million due to the pandemic. In my opinion, it is unconscionable that these classrooms are not to be included in the existing construction of phase 1, when costs will be lower and construction more efficient. I am particularly troubled that the classrooms do not seem to be in the plans at all anymore. D200 continues to have a large $90 million in reserve, $90 million in reserves. There is no good reason to not bring the classrooms up to the 21st century under these circumstances. From Amy Stanis. Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to thank you for your dedication to support our students, parents, faculty, staff, administration, and community at large. My name is Amy Stanis, and I am a community member, taxpayer, parent of 2 future OPRF students, and a teacher in the special education division. This is my 18th year in special education, and I have never spoken at a board meeting nor submitted a comment to be read at a board meeting, but I'm compelled to do so tonight. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to express my serious concerns about the proposal to restructure our service delivery model in special education, since an opportunity to discuss these monumental changes was not afforded to our division members, our special education students, nor their families. In a district that has historically valued and encouraged stakeholder input, effective communication, and transparency, I would have expected our veteran leadership to have ensured all voices were heard before submitting the proposal to the board. I'm in a unique position, having worked in the building for 15 years in the LD continuum and now off campus in our site transition program, which serves young adults with disabilities from the LD, SED, and teen continuums, as well as students from off-campus placement. students. When I worked in the building and transitioned off campus to my new position at site, to say that I relied on my program chair for guidance is an understatement. For 18 years, my program chairs have served as my mentors. They have been my main points of contact for problem solving in the classroom and instructional coaching without fear of being negatively evaluated. As you are aware, while special education teachers do not have dedicated instructional coaches like other divisions, our program chairs have actually fulfilled this role for several decades. In addition to mentoring and instructional coaching, I've always relied on my program chair to help me build positive relationships with my new students and families because the chairs are the most consistent and integral members of their IEP teams. Under the proposed model, it is not feasible to offer meaningful and individualized supports to our students, families, and staff. Thank you. The next two were read in person. Catherine Hall, is that also? Okay, yeah, I thought I recognized that name. Let me see exactly that.
Yes, thank you. Is this okay now? Okay. So this is from Vanessa and Donovan Hooker. First and foremost, I want to say that this is a very shameful thing to even think about cutting this Joyce Fawn from Oak Park River Forest. Fawn is invaluable. She is most understanding and has been such a comfort for me and a helper to my son Donovan. I understand the physical and emotional demands of working with children, and to have the perfect blend of patience, energy, compassion, and responsibility, but she tops it off with a dose of genuine love.
I'm sorry, I believe this is already read. I think this was comment number 12.
Oh, good. Okay. Then I will go on. This is from Sinead Elward. Good evening. I'm the parent of a rising ninth grader currently attending Brooks Elementary with an IEP. She has had an interrupted education for a year. In order to engage in the classroom, she required the assistance of a one-on-one aide, which is physically impossible in remote learning. Over the last year, she has to deal with the trauma of losing everything she held dear: school, Special Olympics, Bravo, best buddies, and peer tutors. In-person school is everything to her. As a minimally verbal child with autism and developmental delays, she has struggled to understand what is happening and why. She attends in person 4 meetings a week and sporadically joins Zoom when she can to get her cooperative outside of those times. The trauma of change is very real to her. Our initial introduction to District 200 was via an Alibus process of class registration. Littlest process of class registration. I was expected to choose classes for my child on a form that did not have any special education options. I had to register a minimally verbal child in honors or college prep classes just so I could get her into treble choir. I had to plan for a transition meeting with no ability to visit the school or see the classrooms or observe the teaching style. Last week, we had our transition meeting to OPRO. She was introduced to the team staff. She was introduced to someone who was labeled a case manager and teacher. Altogether, it was a successful transition meeting, and it was all a good way to start such a significant upcoming transition. A few hours after the meeting, I discovered that the team program chairs had been given notification that her role was being eliminated and replaced by an administrator. Additionally, we discovered that all 4 special education program chairs will be eliminated. First, let me unpack what this signals to my family and what it means to my daughter. To my husband and I, this means that we are sending our already traumatized daughter into a school and into a department that is in disarray. Additionally, it means that we cannot trust anything that was shared in the meeting because the special education department is clearly run by someone who does not trust their own staff. It means everything is subject to change. To my daughter, it means additional trauma. She was introduced to people who may not be there in the fall. This is a child who has gone from a loving school to throwing electronics against the wall to get out of attending Zoom classes. At a time when she most needs a consistent schedule, a consistent team, and a consistent plan, she is now facing
into a completely unknown experience. We are looking forward to high school. We were looking forward to high school. For years, our community has applauded Fawn Joyce and the teen program. Our community has thrived in teen. We have lost all trust for our daughter's future at OPRF. Students with significant special needs are not pawns in a budget game. From Jerry Humphrey. Dear President Dixon Spivey and members of the District 200 Board, I am writing to you today regarding the restructuring of the Special Education Department. I always found the program chairs that attended our IEP meetings to be professional, helpful, and engaged. The program chairs made changes to the accommodations in the IEP clearly and with the consensus of the team in the meeting. I do want to call your attention to one program chair who went above and beyond. Last year was my child's senior year. We were having two significant issues at school, one with another student harassing my child and one with a teacher. The issues were so significant that they were causing trauma and harm to my child. Fawn Joyce called me about the upcoming IEP meeting and asked, how are things going? That simple question began a conversation and a relationship that literally changed our lives. When I told Fawn about the two major issues with my child, she immediately jumped in to help. Her focus was completely child-centered. Fawn never said this is outside of the scope of my job. Fawn did not try to pass the problems along to someone else. Fawn dived into the middle of the issues because my child at OPF was severely struggling, and she knew that someone had to manage the issues across the silos and fiefdoms that is OPRF. She showed professionalism, integrity, compassion, and patience. Primarily Dawn-centered the child. Fawn-centered the child. She had numerous conversations with my child to make sure he knew someone was trying to help him through the maze of red tape and hands-on at OPRF. Fawn advocated for my child, her most important job. Next, she talked to me every step of the way. That included calling me from home late at night and calling me while driving with her own crying children in the car. Fawn understood that these issues needed urgent attention. In school day hours did not find her sense of service. She worked on my child's problems day and night. She's the epitome of a public service in a public school. To think that the special education department would lose that leadership and an example of Fawn Joyce's to put her back in the classroom is disheartening. Of course, the students in Fawn's class would benefit from her loving and tender care, but the special education department needs Fawn in a leadership position. I like to say that special education department has 99 problems, but the program chairs are not one of them. I would like to encourage executive director to reevaluate her decision to remove the program chairs from their positions. I believe there are many areas that can be improved within special ed, with one of the top ones focusing on twice exceptional learners at OPRF. That area is completely lacking from my experience, and these types of learners sit in no man's land at OPRF. It also might be prudent to have somewhat normal year with students and teachers in school building before attempting a restructure. From Holly Barnes. As a parent of a child who receives special education services, I was shocked to hear of the plan to essentially demote our 4 excellent program chairs and replace them with new staff in administrative roles. The chairs are the heart and soul of the programs and a wealth of institutional knowledge and strong relationships with families. I cannot imagine why the current administration thinks our children will be better served by having new people in these roles. An announcement came out of the blue with no input from parents, and the letter that was meant to explain this decision did nothing to clarify how this plan came about. Many parents rely on the current program chairs for guidance and assistance, and to have those lifelines removed is quite a blow. Additionally, reassigning the program chairs to the classroom will end up pushing out some untenured teachers. What a way to thank them for their hard work and inventive work at the end of an extremely challenging school year. The board should not vote on this plan tonight as it has arisen so suddenly and without suitable explanation. A restructuring this dramatic, put into place by a brand new executive director of special education and presumably blessed by an outgoing superintendent, requires extensive discussion and consideration before any decisions are actually made. Board members, please put the brakes on this. The next one is from John and Shannon O'Brien. Dear School Board, we are writing to express our extreme dissatisfaction with the recent actions of the executive director who, after 7 months in her position during a pandemic, is attempting to restructure her department. Obviously, this is her prerogative, and we are writing to strongly voice our objection. In the letter which she chose to send on Friday at 4 p.m., can you say Friday Newsdome? 4 business days before the board meeting, she calls the parents of the special education students valuable partners. If we were valuable partners, she would have solicited our assessment of the current personnel and educational structure. If we were valuable partners, she would have asked about our children's response to the department's efforts during the stressful year. Partner is defined as performing a task together. We have been fortunate to partner with Ms. Fawn Joyce. Ms. Joyce, through her phone calls to our home in the evening, or stopping in at the Learning Lab to check on our daughter's anxieties during this crazy year, has earned our highest respect as a true partner in Jackie's education. We urge you to hit pause on the restructuring and ask for input from the parents and teachers as well as review the educational metrics required by the state. Let's remember the school's mission and strive to do what's right for our children.
From Carrie Craig, dear BOE and administration, thank you for your public service. One of my favorite quotes is from then Vice President Joe Biden in 2008. Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. Under this board and administration, I have seen your budget, and it appears you value administration and hiring more administrators and $30 million cafeterias. But you definitely do not value services and support for students, especially those with special needs. From the absurd proposal this winter to cut $30,000 in funding for special education field trips, to the current rush proposal to suddenly restructure the special education department, at least your budget is consistent. More money for administrators and less hands-on support for our most vulnerable students and their families. I've been a taxpayer in District 200 for 23 years, and a parent of OPRF students for the past 7. In the past 5 years, and specifically the last 5 months, I continue to be shocked by the massive changes that this board, superintendent, and new administrators are racing to push through before the elections next month and before the next administrator is in place. What is the rush? Why make a difficult year more challenging? Why create more chaos? What are you afraid will happen? Why would you not seek input from the teachers, program chairs, and families of our most vulnerable students before making significant changes? Your values and your rush to implement them are transparent only in their consistent disrespect for the community of students you serve and the community of taxpayers who support this district. Slow down. Listen to the practitioners. Listen to the special needs families that have been in crisis for the past 12 months, surviving without the hands-on support of their team. Please thoughtfully work with them to meet the needs of these extraordinary students that require their teachers, their classroom aides, their support services, and their program chairs to work in concert for the students. From John Schultz, dear BOE and administration, thank you for your public service. One of my favorite quotes from Marcus Lewin, dear BOE, the Board of Education's role is to be an advocate for our community and students, especially during difficult times. I am requesting that the BOE take a decisive and urgent stand for the benefit of our students with increased time in the classroom through the end of the school year by collapsing or eliminating cohorts and opening the schools to students the week after spring break. I also request that such measures be implemented immediately with respect to all IEP students. Most of the teachers have been fully vaccinated. The CDC reduced social distancing to 3 feet in schools with safety protocols in place. And OPRF high school saliva testing mitigate nearly all risks. Many students have been traumatized by the lack of in-person learning this year, while millions of students across the U.S. have been in the classroom safely since August with no serious health issues to students or teachers. These large and small school districts opened safely following data on science, safety protocols, and a student-first mindset. Meanwhile, in school districts with heavy-handed unions that put teachers first and students last, remote learning was the only option. Due to unnecessary and prolonged school closings, many remote students struggle with anxiety, depression, and as a result, teen suicide is now a national health crisis. Lack of in-person learning has been and continues to be especially damaging to many children with IEPs. It has been absolutely remarkable to experience the positive difference when my child has been able to attend school in person. This is consistent with what many parents, educators, and mental health professionals have been stating for many months, that a return to in-person learning is critical, particularly for children with IEPs.
The BOE should be focused on ensuring our students have as much time as possible in the remaining few months. It's important to note, most Chicago suburban high schools, including Downers Grove North and South, Glenbrook North and South, Lyons Township, and New Trier, are in person 5 days a week for all students that want to attend in person. Additionally, these schools do not have a post-spring break adaptive pause. They will be in person for as much time as possible in the classroom. In closing, parents nor taxpayers should have to beg to get our children safely in classrooms. We deserve better, and so do our children. Thank you for your consideration. Tammy Schultz. I am the parent of 3 students with IEPs at OPRF, one past, one present, and one future next year. We have received much care and support through the special education department and are grateful for their hard work on our behalf. Lindsay Kirby and Fawn Joyce have chaired every IEP meeting we have had for the past 7 years, and both have done excellent jobs for us. Receiving the notice of the elimination of their positions in favor of administrators was upsetting to us. Why would those who have served our school with excellence be demoted or required to reapply? The answers provided are inadequate, and we see no benefit to the restructuring proposed. The LEE requirement by the IDEA has been in place since at least 2004 and met for nearly 20 years by our current structure. Using this as an excuse to remove those we have full confidence in is appalling. Ms. Francois Wu has not yet served as the current executive director for a full school year. She has not met our students nor seen the school function in full. We fail to see the wisdom in implementing this proposal without her full knowledge of our school. What will be the measurable outcome of this change? How will it benefit our students and the teachers and students who serve them? We have struggled through this uncertain year of the pandemic. Our students and children are the ones most deeply affected, as seen in my child who has had 2 hospitalizations in this past year. Her need for structure, routine, and familiar is stronger now than ever. Making a change at this time leaves us without one of our needed supports, the division. We request that time, energy, and resources be directed at strengthening our special ed department at this time, and trust that a better solution can be found than the proposal presented to you tonight. From Penny Flannery. Dear BOE, I'm requesting the BOE take a stand for our students with increased time in the classroom to the end of the school year by collapsing or eliminating cohorts and opening the schools to students the week after spring break. Most of the teachers have been fully vaccinated. The CDC reduced social distancing to 3 feet in schools with safety protocols in place, and OPR high school, this seems to be a repeat of previous years. It's not. And OPR high school saliva testing mitigating nearly all risks. Many students have been traumatized by the lack of in-person learning this year, while millions of students across the U.S. have been in classrooms safely since August with no serious health issues to students or teachers. These large and small school districts open safely following data, science, safety protocols, and the student-first mindset. Meanwhile, in school districts with heavy-handed unions that put teachers first and students last, remote learning was the only option. Due to unnecessary and prolonged school closings, many remote students struggle with anxiety, depression, and as a result, teen suicide is now a national health crisis. The BOE should be focused on ensuring our students have as much time as possible in the remaining 2 months. It's important to note most Chicago suburban high schools, North and South, Glenbrook North and South, Lyons Township, and New Trier are in person 5 days a week for all students that want to attend in person. Additionally, these schools do not have a post-spring break adaptive pause. They will be in person for as much time as possible. In closing, parents nor taxpayers should have to beg to get our children safe in the classroom. We deserve better, and so do our children. Thank you for your consideration.
This one is from Mr. John Nicolati. This is a comment to the board regarding the restructuring of the special education department. In a time when there is so much talk in the community, and indeed at OPRF, about taking the time to solicit feedback from the community, I find it odd in the middle of the night and without any community discussion, this board has decided to replace the entire staff of the special education department and hire a new director from outside the community. As a parent of 2 children with disabilities, I find this disturbing and hypocritical. While we have had a long and extended discussions involving the community around curriculum, race, and equity, the disabled have largely been absent from this discussion and is present at all. It has been at least a best lip service. We even allowed the film crew in here for 2 years to highlight the racial divide. However, this restructuring merits nothing but a short memo to parents who have spent years and countless hours developing relationships in school so that their kids can thrive. This move disrespects that investment that those parents have made. To understand what keeps the parents up at night, everyone needs to understand that as adults, these kids will face staggeringly high rates of unemployment, mental health issues, substance abuse, among things that no one would ever want their child to go through. These kids are largely invisible to us, tucked away from view, or off campus, effectively banished from the community. Those who are silenced and they are with us are left without those kind of these discussions, if we even have one, and they're easily forgotten when they leave us. The board has given no specific reason for this change. Unlike the curriculum changes, nothing has been offered, but would have been better for our children. Please wait until you consult the community. Please wait for the new board. These kids deserve no less. Thanks. From Irene Walensky. Good afternoon. We object to the organizational change in special education. How does this help our community and our children? We have been in touch with many parents of special education students at OPRF. We are all very confused and upset by the change. We would like to understand why this change is needed. The current system works and the staff have been doing a great job. Vaughn Joyce is our chair, and she has been an excellent and invaluable department chair, facilitator, and an empathetic resource to all the families. Can you let us all know who will have the decision-making power over our children's education once the program chair roles are enacted? From Carla Bulalowski. Dear BOE, the Board of Education's role is to be advocates for our community and our students, especially during difficult times. I'm requesting the BOE take a stand for our students with increased time in the classroom through the end of the school year by collapsing or eliminating cohorts and opening the schools to students the week after spring break. Most of the teachers have been fully vaccinated. The CDC reduced social distancing to 3 feet in schools with safety protocols in place. And OPRFHS saliva testing mitigates nearly all risks. Many students have been traumatized by the lack of in-person learning this year, while millions of students across the U.S. have been in classrooms safely since August, with no serious health issues to students or teachers. These large and small school districts open safely, follow data, science, safety protocols, and a student-first mindset. Meanwhile, in school districts with heavy-handed unions that put teachers first and students last, remote learning was the only option. Due to unnecessary prolonged school closings, many remote students struggle with anxiety and depression, and as a result, teen suicide is now a national health crisis. The BOE should be focused on ensuring our students have much time as possible in the remaining few months. It's important to note, most Chicago suburban high schools, including Downers Grove North and South, Glenbrook North and South, Lyons Township, and New Trier are in person 5 days a week for all students that want to attend in person. Additionally, these schools do not have a post-spring break adaptive fall. They will be in person for as much time as possible in the classroom. In closing, parents and taxpayers should beg to get our children safely in the classroom. They deserve better, and so do our children. Thank you for your consideration.
So this is from Christina Moore. I'm writing to object to the proposed restructuring of the special education. Mrs. Vaughn Joyce has helped my son Jaylene Moore by being a great resource person, always giving awesome information on programs and generally caring about not only Jalen, but my daughter Jada, Jamari, my husband, and myself. Mrs. Vaughn is an important part of our family and is irreplaceable. She needs to retain her position. I pray that the administration and board come up with some other plan that will meet the district's needs without depriving us of our leverage. Kathy Moran. I am writing to express my strong objection to the restructuring of the special education department by eliminating the board chair. Lindsay Kirby's SED department chair is an invaluable resource. She knows her teachers, understands the nuances of the program and curriculum, and cares about the students and family. during the craziness of the year. Now does not seem the time to restructure the department. Tomorrow it works because Lindsay has created relationships with all stakeholders and in the best interest of all involved. The proposed restructuring did not include any parents, caregivers, teachers, and students and teachers. Please put the brakes on this proposed restructuring and consider why the current program share model is working in the city department, thanks to the caring, knowledgeable, and tireless efforts of I have one that I don't think we read, but this is from John Schultz. One of my favorite quotes is from the Vice President Joe Biden in 2020.
Hang on, Dale, let me start. One sec.
It was two just alike.
Yeah, I think they're.
Read one of them.
Tammy Schultz, and it sounds like this is the same comment maybe from one person.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other people present who would like to make public comment this evening? Just to manage people's expectations, because I heard a lot in public comments, reflecting a belief that we are voting on this tonight. This is not up for a vote tonight, it is up only for discussion. So certainly we welcome those who want to wait to hear the discussion, but this is not an action item, so no action would actually be taken this evening. All right, thank you, everyone. We have now approval of minutes. So I move to approve the February 11th, 2021 committee of the whole meeting minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so now we have a discussion that I am very much looking forward to. It is a discussion of the 2003 Learning Community Performance Gap Report. This report was a little bit dated at this point. However, I think a lot of the findings are still applicable, which is why we wanted to continue the conversation tonight and look at respectively where we were and where we are. Joining us this evening, we have Dr. Lincoln Chandler, who will be facilitating the conversation. And we have Dr. Spike, one of the original authors of the report, as well as Dr. Bailey, who are both present virtually.
I just want to add that this item is in compliance with strategic plan priorities 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Board of Education goal number 4. Dr. Chandler.
Thank you. Thank you, board, for taking this conversation and for inviting me to join.
Hold on, Dr. Chandler, 1 second. There's something that he also sent to be projected on the screen. I believe it was sent to Ms. Carrington. There it is. Thank you. Sorry for that.
So thank you, board. Thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting this conversation. I was in touch with Dr. Spike. Do we know if he's
He's back. He was having some technical difficulties, but he's back.
Okay, excellent. So we're going to start by having Dr. Spike, who was one of the authors of this report, provide some reflections. But then we're going to move into some of the findings and recommendations for conversation. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Dr. Spike.
Dr. Spike, you're muted.
There we are.
There you go.
Yeah, I had to totally restart my computer a moment ago. It's nothing like Murphy's Law challenges there, but I'm back now. Thank you. To Superintendent and Board of the Whole, I apologize for not being there physically. I would want to have been. I'm a seriously senior citizen who has not had his first COVID vaccination, so I did not want to risk coming out in the public forum, but I'm going to tolerate this Zoom session. I detest the whole process. It feeds into my worst introverted aspects to try to talk and communicate through this kind of medium, but we'll do as we can. James Baldwin has observed in his time many years ago that these are dangerous times, and they are dangerous times indeed. We are in a period where the voices of Black lives and Black Minds Matter are colliding with the resurgence of white supremacists and white opportunists populism. We have many challenges that we face in trying to navigate this educational terrain that we all work in, and I am appreciative of the opportunity to talk about something quite old for me, but which seems to have some currency for at least some of you. Certainly, I'm struggling to appreciate both the intention and the intentionality that brings us together to talk about this. It seems to have been a long time coming. And certainly I have been perhaps rather cheeky in asking for a privileged opportunity to speak with some amount of focused comments so early in this evening's agenda, perhaps already late now. My goal here is to speak the truth to erstwhile powerful forces in the educational world of Oak Park and River Forest, and to look back in a way that helps us to find a way going forward. I feel I'm uniquely positioned to bring to this discussion some important insights and perspectives, which is what motivates me to ask for a few minutes. I'm going to try to focus my time. I've got a set of notes that I'm going to try to use to guide me, and honoring a request for about 10 minutes. My wife and I and children moved to the Oak Park River Forest community back in 1987, motivated by a desire to benefit, we thought then, from the quality educational opportunities that Oak Park River Forest community afforded. When I moved here, I was an experienced technical manager, a research scientist, and a university educator. I'm talking about 1987. My wife and I were immediately immersed in trying to guarantee our access to quality education for our children in Oak Park. My wife was a co-founder, ultimately, of an organization called APPLE, came to be called APPLE, African American Parents for Purposeful Leadership in Education. And I also ultimately got involved in that same organization as it was being birthed in the late 80s, early 90s. In 93, 94, I was chair and the statistician of a powerful 10-member discipline study team, which established definitively that there was and is a discipline gap in terms of behavioral consequences at Oak Park River Forest High School. That team involved about 10 members, including Gerald Clay, who was a co-founder of APPLE, and Jocelyn Simmons, who was the leader of the NAACP at the time, very powerful activist in the Oak Park River Forest community, 93, 94, when that study team made it clear that there was an achievement gap around discipline and a discipline gap itself. In 97, 98, I was president of APPLE itself and continued to be involved in trying to advance the issues of African-American parents at Oak Park River Forest High School. In 2003, I became, 2001 to 2003, I became a member of the African American Achievement Study Team, which ultimately gave rise to the Learning Community Performance Gap of 2003. In 2004 to about 2009, I was what was called an institutional researcher at Oak Park River Forest High School, hired as a part-time member of staff. This is, you probably can't see that very well, what would have been a kind of business card, Carl Spike, PhD, institutional researcher, that I used when I was a member of that part-time staff for various MSAN meetings. That was 2004 to about 2009. In that time, I was involved in trying to advance many of the recommendations, implementation of many of the recommendations of the 2003 Learning Community Performance Gap report. I was also tutoring who was then Director of Instruction, Phil Prell, who ultimately became Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, Phil Prell. I was tutoring him in action research and in how to implement information-based differential evaluation and improvement processes and programs. I ultimately terminated my involvement at Oak Park River Forest High School in 2009 when I became extremely frustrated with the then superintendent and his management style. And since 2009, I have self-described myself as sitting up in the high bleachers, observing the stumbling efforts at Oak Park River Forest High School to attack both the discipline system gaps and the achievement gap. As I saw boards come and go, administrators come and go, and superintendents come and go. My observation is that Oak Park and River Forest communities have been sadly and disturbingly, how can we say it, capable of making disastrous choices in board members, in superintendents, and in administrators chosen by superintendents and affirmed by boards. Of course, all present, company accepted. These choices have been a part of the problem of why so little progress has been made at Oak Park River Forest High School in the discipline gap and in the achievement gap. The 2003 report, to my eye, is quite dated, but it remains salient in many of its aspects, but certainly quite dated. It is a difficult and cold read now in 2021, the 2003 report. It's a gumbo that was best served warm, and now, of course, it is quite cold, 2021 compared to the 2003 date when it was released to the public. That report was a document that spoke with passion and wisdom and professionalism and intellectual brilliance from its 8 members. But it's also a document that talked the language of Wade Boykin triple quandary and talked the language of William Cross, Black racial identity attitude scales, BRIAS, and so on. You talked the language of what then would have been the legacies of Black cultural nationalist thinking about Black identity. So this is a document that is quite dated, but it has some salient aspects, and those I want to focus. But before I do it, however, I want to spend just a moment or so to do something perhaps unexpected, and that is to recommend a more current document, in this case, a book. I'm going to try to represent it there. It's a book authored by Amanda Lewis and John Diamond. The title of the book, Despite the Best Intentions, How Racial Inequality Thrives in Good Schools. Much of the insights of our 2003 document are captured in a book, in this case, about 10 years later, published around 2015, which has a much better narrative form, a much greater readability, much more current in its language, and it has some powerful insights. Actually, it affirms and reinforces and perhaps better articulates the many points that we made in the 2003 document. And I'm speaking now with some authority about the 2003 document since I was there and was a part of the process of the 2003 document. This book should be something that new board members ought be required to read in context and in association perhaps with the 2003 document because of its power. In chapters 1 and 2 of the book, it introduces the concept of operational organizational routines and this notion of an ostensive and a performative aspects to those routines that gives rise to the great difficulty of attacking achievement gaps, be they in schools or elsewhere, that are racialized by our currently lived experience in the US. This book is powerful in that regard. In chapter 3, it talks about, I'll choose to read for a moment its title. The road to detention is paved with good intentions, race and discipline, in this case at Riverview. Riverview is a community talks about in the book that is very much like Oak Park River Forest in terms of the community. The road to detention is paved with good intention, chapter 3. Chapter 4, the title of that chapter, it's like two high schools, race, tracking, and performance expectations, chapter 4. Chapter 5, it talks about opportunity hoarding, creating and maintaining racial advantage. This book is a powerful affirmation of what we tried to say in our 2003 report, but it's much more current in this voicing. John Diamond is member of faculty at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Amanda Lewis, the co-author of the book, is currently at UIC, and in that sense is opportunity. There's an opportunity in terms of their availability. John Diamond has a YouTube video easily available called Race, Performance, Expectations, and Opportunity Hoarding, which gives you some quick access to the book if you want to approach it from a somewhat different learning style. So I'm recommending the book as a way to affirm, to explicate, to better articulate perhaps much of what we tried to say in the 2003 report. And I know that's probably somewhat unexpected in terms of this conversation. To return to the report, however, there's something that is quite singular in my mind that is worth emphasizing. And so I'm going to read one of the findings of the report, literally as it reads in the report itself. It says, quote, "There is a systemic learning community performance gap at Oak Park and River Forest High School. The learning community performance gap suggests that two communities exist at the high school. One for white students that place them at academic promise, and one for African American students that place them at academic risk. The learning community performance gap is further exacerbated by differential outcomes." That observation continues. "The learning community performance gap is further exacerbated by differential outcomes in the success rates for African Americans and white students in accelerated and honors courses. Two schools in one placing students at academic promise, the other placing our students at academic risk, in particular in accelerated and in honors courses." So I'm going to finish my comments by affirming something that I see underway at the high school after having been away for so long, sitting in the high bleachers looking at stumbling efforts up to this point. The flag of equity at Oak Park River Forest High School has been in 2021 squarely placed in the arena of detracking the freshman curriculum and in the battle of implementation that has been engaged in that detracking. In my view, this is precisely the battle to be fought at this time in this fierce urgency of now. The good news is that you have undoubtedly a impassioned, a skillful, and properly placed administrator set on the task. Greg Johnson and Laurie Fiorenzo, there we are, Fiorenza, there we go. Laurie Fiorenza and Greg Johnson are exemplary administrators for the task at hand. And so I end up and beg the question, can a board be preserved and elected? And can a superintendent be found in 2021 with the skills and the courage to create and stay the course of institutional investments in the critically needed evidence-based action research that will be required for the success of this initiative, the detracking of the freshman curriculum? Can a board be preserved and a superintendent be found in 21 with the courage and the skills? I give back whatever time I might have had for comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Spike. Dr. Chandler?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Spike, for bringing us from there to here, and also for mentioning what I think are always going to be some good next steps. So for the balance of our time here, for the sake of the folks unfamiliar with the document, I've prepared some summaries grouped into 3 areas. We're going to talk about major findings from the report. We're also going to talk about some barriers to the success of previous past interventions. And we're also going to provide a summary of the recommendations for comment by the board. And just for the sake of time, I'm going to ask that after I summarize, that we limit our responses to a couple of minutes, just so we can kind of keep things moving. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so in summary, the major findings asserted this notion that Black and white OPRF students experience separate learning communities during their time. There were quantitative findings, namely that Black students in non-honors classes are less likely to receive A's or B's. Black students scored lower on standardized tests. Among seniors with comparable honors enrollment and test performance, white students had more A's and B's in those honors courses. Over time, white students were showing growth in their cumulative GPA, whereas Black students were showing virtually no GPA. The correlation between cumulative GPA and standardized test scores was higher for Black students. There was a Black-white GPA gap within OPRF students from this major feeder districts, District 97 and District 90. However, overall, District 90 alums had higher average GPAs and a smaller gap between Black students and white students. And over a 3-year period, it was observed that the pattern and frequency of disciplinary infractions remained constant for both Black and white students. Some of the major qualitative findings were the notion of, they found that Black students who were able to successfully internalize and negotiate what's called a triple quandary of white, minority, and cultural norms tended to have higher GPAs. However, even for those Black students with higher GPAs, there was still a learning community performance gap compared to white students. By successful negotiation, it implied an awareness of external perceptions of Black students, so they were aware of how they would be perceived, and also supported by strategies from family and community to manage and cope, frankly, with those perceptions. Black students who did not successfully negotiate that triple quandary tended to have lower GPA and more disciplinary actions for being disruptive or defiant. It was also found that Black students were found, quote, less likely to feel safe and happy about school and classroom environments, and also, quote, less likely to feel happy about their teachers. And finally was the point that Dr. Spike left us with, saying that the gap was seen to be systemic, and it did suggest the existence of two communities coexisting in OPRF. One for white students that place them in academic promise, and one for Black students that place them in academic risks. So those major findings, as we've said, some of them seem to remain relevant and persist to this day, and they currently inform several current board initiatives, such as CCB and the recent work with racial equity. So I'm asking the board for feedback on what were your takeaways from this analysis, and where have you seen progress?
Thank you, Dr. Chandler. Who would like to begin? I mean, I will, but is there anybody else who would like to go?
I'll just speak briefly. One thing that caught my eye that I think still persists is great inflation for the higher honor students. And later in the agenda, we're going to be talking to some degree about just evaluating some of the things around calculating GPAs, how many honors classes should be counted towards in the weighted GPA. And so I think that, yeah, it's set up in a way where, you know, those already on the upper end of the academic ladder coming in, is perception that that's part of it. And I did get data, I asked for, they before the data that showed since 2003, this persistent gap of about 1 point, 3/4 of a point to 1 point, you know, between white students and Black students. And so, you know, it's interesting in this COVID year too, colleges already were on track of not requiring SATs, but even this year, especially with all that's been going on, disruption to students, and not having SAT be required. I know it's certainly, so anyway, so that trend towards standardized testing, questioning what the biases inherent in it, I think is really important to consider. So, so that's one brief thing that came to my mind, and we can think about it in a holistic manner, not just as it relates to this gap, but also this overall, you know, in terms of just the equity in your school. So that's all for now. We can hear me through the minutes.
Thank you. Other board members?
Hey, Sarah, can you hear me?
Yeah, please just speak up because I can't see everyone at once, so.
All right, it's Tom. I can't see myself, but I just want to make sure I'm being heard, that's all. Okay, so I want to go back, you know, Dr. Chandler, you asked a question. Dr. Spite asked a question, why now? Okay. So I want to kind of, in my perspective, to bridge some of the gaps and answer the questions I've heard. One is, you know, we've done as a board a number of, I would say, shared learning experiences on books. I appreciate your recommendation of the book. It's one that I know I read earlier in my career on the board. So it certainly sounds like it was a good read. But in terms of, you know, why now? We've been, you know, talking about race in a variety of ways, but how can we make it actionable? And here we have right in front of us, you know, work product that was done thanks to the efforts of you and others who that really, you know, unbundled and outlined a number of things. And why not look at what we're, you know, at our own work versus go outside? And so with the hope of making it actionable. There was recently a request to even look at another consultant to do this and that. And, you know, I don't believe we need to look at another consultant to give us another set of perspectives. I think we have a lot of information right here at our fingertips. And so I'm looking forward to unbundling and hearing what have we done, you know, that was outlined, I guess, 18 years ago. I mean, it certainly is frustrating or whatever to think that you've got a study that was done that reflected back 25 years, and now we're reflecting back 18 years. So the decades go by quickly. So what has been done versus what was recommended? I want to approach that in two different perspectives. One issue that often comes up is resources. And so I've done some, digging in resources. And our district has not been shy on the resource front. We have, since 2003, we have, as a district, we have spent significant money, more than what CPI exists, and there's data there. So it's not that we haven't, ponied up for resources, but the question is, are the resources we're using delivering results that we need? And, based on the fact that we're having this discussion today, tells me the answer is no. Okay, that the resources that we've used have not achieved the results we want. And so I really appreciate the question there of what are the measures and what is the progress on the specific initiatives. I know with discipline, with curriculum, you've got some action, which is the first time, it's recent. During my tenure on the board, to me, that's some positive steps forward, but those are just two of the many things that were outlined. So I'm going to just stop there and allow others to chime in.
I'll chime in, Sarah. Thank you, Dr. Spite and Dr. Bailey for hanging in there with us and allowing us to have this discussion. And I appreciate your honesty about the frustration of why now and also what happened. And your perspective, just the context is helpful. It raises, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for me, a lot more questions than solutions. But I'm always struck by with the recommendations, and Dr. Spite, you and I have talked about this, the whole idea of impact and how we're talking about goals, but also how we're measuring our impact, and that being at the level of when we can, that's reflected in our students, whether it is academic, social, emotional, however we're talking about it. And I think the last bullet on the slide that you had up before, Lincoln, that talked about, we're having a process for reflecting on initiatives and deciding when they are plans for reflection and judgment of effectiveness. And that's something I think that it would be helpful to hear the perspective, Lincoln, yours, as well as our other kind of data and evaluation folks, and certainly Carl, you and George, because that's where I think some of my frustrations come in. How are we deciding what is working and what's not? And if it's not working, what do we do to either course correct or to justify the elimination or continuation? And I think we heard a little bit of that perhaps tonight, even with public comment. Not to say that decisions that are or recommendations that are made aren't necessary, but are we using a rubric or a standard that eliminates the kind of subjective nature that can happen? And I think about that, just reflecting on my children's time at the high school, particularly my oldest, and the Project Scholar was here during his time. He was actually one of the mentors during that program, and the clustering that was done, which has been evidence-based and was resurrected, quasi-resurrected, I'll say, a couple of years ago. But there's no real answer. And I remember Steve Gevinson, my first term on the board, asking, what happened to Project Scholar? And why did we stop that? That was a great program. And we can't find out any information. So as you know, I appreciate your humility about this being dated, and perhaps there are other resources. But I think for our community, we're still talking about these same issues, and digging deeper into some of your recommendations that have to do with things like grades and getting the perspective of some of the qualitative aspects of why classroom experiences are different are things that we've struggled with. We have hypotheses on, and sometimes we develop programs, but I'm not sure we are gathering information and how to gather that information on how we address those issues that deal directly with race, racism, bias, and that two schools and that happiness factor that you talk about. So those are some of the takeaways that I have.
I'll jump in if no one else wants to. Is that okay?
Yes.
Just want to make sure, when you do this virtual stuff, you don't know whose hand is actually up. So I do want to thank Dr. Spike, Dr. Bailey. Look, good news, bad news. Because I always want to try to find some good news along with the bad news. The bad news, and I think you did a really good job of identifying it in your report, and I think there's no reason to think it has gone away, is your report really showed the textbook definition of structural racism. And I think one of the findings that really demonstrated that beyond any doubt was the relative change in GPA over time, white African American. That is damning. That clearly shows that a specific group of students were singled out for disadvantage. There's no question. I also appreciate the fact that and there's other things in your finding, but that to me is like one of the compelling things I look for when I research a system. You pointed out that initiatives thus far have suffered from a number of flaws, lack of evidence base, lack of identified metrics to accomplish from an outcome standpoint, lack of appropriate ways to monitor them. I think the good news is our board is taking a step towards implementing policies at the board level that would require any proposal put forward by the administration to address these racial inequities be evidence-based, have identifiable metrics, and be reported back at regular intervals to the board so we could evaluate them against these metrics to determine whether a course correction is needed. So those flaws in implementation, we are trying to address with policy right here, right now. And so I appreciate the fact that you highlighted that. I agree, it's awful hard to change a system unless you're taking a research-based approach. I think the one area where we certainly need more information, and in my mind, this is the role of an equity audit or a racism audit. We've identified with the data a compelling case that structural racism does in fact exist in our school. What we haven't been able to do, I think, to this date, is isolate the specific barriers and practices that we are engaged in that keep reinforcing and perpetuating this structural racism. And I think identification of those specific barriers, as well as identification of the practices, is crucial in identifying the appropriate evidence-based remedies to be implemented. So I think, to my mind, we've done a really good job of identifying the problem and identifying why our responses to the problem to date have not been as effective as we would like. I think the missing piece is, well, there's two missing pieces in my mind. Number one is that now that we know that the structural racism is there and there's no question about that, let's really do what it takes to identify the specific practices that have contributed to those. One of those we have identified, and I appreciate your support for the detracking initiative. I think that's a very important initiative, but we need to identify all the other barriers and all the other practices. And then I think we need to have, call it a logic model, call it a comprehensive plan from beginning to end. Once we've identified these practices that have perpetuated a structurally racist system over time, then we need to create a priority list for which of those practices we're going to eliminate first, in which areas and why. If we don't have the resources to do it all at once, although I'd prefer to do it all at once, we may not be able to do that. It's a lot of change. But those that have the biggest bang for our buck should certainly be done first. But I would like to see the comprehensive plan, from an instruction or pedagogy standpoint. Here are the barriers we've identified. From a cultural standpoint, here are the barriers we've identified, and here are the remedies, and here are the remedies to each of the main areas of the school, so that we have a structured approach to implementing these evidence-based responses to addressing the very clear structural racism. So, while your report may be somewhat dated in language and stuff, I really think the essence of it is still gets to the heart of the essence of the problems we've been experiencing. And I think that the focus on the best practice in remedying these problems, following those evidence-based approaches with appropriate metrics in place, with appropriate oversight in place, and with a clear identification of which practices are the most problematic practices, I think will finally move OPRF in the right direction, so that we are what we want to be, which is a school that provides every student the opportunity to attain to the extent of her or his abilities, irrespective of their innate characteristics. So, thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Gina or Craig?
I'll jump in. There are a couple of things that Ralph said that I definitely agreed with. So thanks, Ralph, for hitting some of those points. I think that first, thank you, Dr. Bailey and Dr. Spite, for being here. In reading your report, what stood out for me was how it's the same report, how the information is the same information that we have now. It was exactly the reason, like Tom said, that I was like, we don't need an audit because we have the information and we have it historically. And you came here tonight to show us again that we have it historically. So I agree. I agree with what Ralph was saying about we need to have this, the practices, right? What are the practices that are going to actually change outcomes? And this is, what are the adult practices, right? One thing you can see in the change of the language from then to now is we do have a lot more focus on, well, it's not the students that are problematic, it's the adults, right? And there was a lot of that in your report too, which I was really appreciative of. And I feel like one of the things that we miss and that we have missed and continue to miss is that the practices are embedded in a psychology, in a belief system, in beliefs and behaviors that come from an undergirding of a white supremacy culture ideology. And I don't think that we attack that in the ways that we could in a systemic way. And I think that in order for us to attack those in a more systemic way, it has to be to acknowledge them as norms in our spaces. We don't acknowledge them as norms in our spaces. We have not, as a board, acknowledged the norm of white supremacy culture and how it shows up as a board for us, right? So there's a need for us to unpack it in ways that we haven't. But now, what I find interesting in looking at the 2003 and then now is that the language that we have to begin to unpack it is a little bit more widely used, or beginning to be conversations that are had, like the reference that you made, Dr. to the uncomfortable for the educators in them to say, wow, that whole practice is based on the idea of branded inferiority of Black and brown students. Like that's the conversation we're not having. Like looking at our practices in that way, wow, that entire practice is set up from this idea of branded inferiority. Now, you don't start to attack that, we're still going to keep doing the same things over and over again, which we've been doing. We keep doing it. And so I'm hoping what I was actually excited about with this report coming, and thank you, Tom, for bringing it up, and for, I really appreciate the earnestness with which our board has said, let's do this. Let's look at this. There's a whole report here that was done. Let's look at this. Let's bring the folks back who actually did the report. Like, I'm so grateful that you all are still here and willing to be here in this conversation with us. Because it just affirms that what we have done has been minimal. What we have done, wherever it fell off for whatever reason, whatever leadership spaces, and as we move into bringing in a new superintendent, I felt that your question of who is this board and is whoever we bring in really ready to do that unpacking? And are all of the leaders in our system really ready to do that unpacking? Because it's going to require a lot on the part of the union. It's going to require a lot on the part of our leadership. It's going to require a lot on the part of our security, our TAs, every single educator in the building. Every single person that works in our building is going to need to be a part of it. So, and engaged in the work, engaged in the personal unpacking, as well as the constant and nonstop interrogation of what we're doing. We don't have a choice but to do that. And your report outlined it in a number of ways. Our racial equity policy outlines what needs to be done in a number of ways. And now it's a matter of doing it. So I was thinking in the CCB meeting that we just had, and I'll wrap up with this because I know I'm on a rant now. And none of us want to be here until midnight, I think.
Gina, we lost your audio.
Lost my audio?
Yeah.
Is it back?
Now we got you back. Yeah.
Okay, good, because it's, yeah. Okay, so the last thing I want to close with is about CCB from our meeting last night. And we went over the behavior education plan, and we actually finally got a report that sounds like we're going to begin to make some moves in a direction that allows us to do things differently. Based on, us having a trauma intervention coordinator, the systemic approach that the administration has done with the staff that presented to us last night. And I really do hope that presentation makes its way to the board, because that was what we've been looking for. It's a start, really solid start. So I think that it's now action time. It's 18 years later of action time. It's 25 years later of action time. It's 30 years later of action time. When I graduated, the same thing, right? So we're here, and now we need leaders that are really going to call it all to task and say, yes, absolutely. This is what we're doing. It's going to be hard. It's going to be extremely uncomfortable. There are going to be numerous people in our community who actually don't like it. Let's be clear. That's coming. That actually do not like it. They've already made it clear. There's a number of people who find detracking very problematic. And the next stages of what we have to do are going to be problematic and uncomfortable as well. And we can't back away from it now. We have to go all in. So thank you, and thank you, and thank you. And I'm so, so glad that you all did the work that you did, so we could go back to it and say, oh, we still got work to do. So thank you. I really appreciate you all being here tonight.
Yeah.
I'm not going to add anything. I think my board colleagues have said everything that comes to mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Bailey, Dr. Swett, I want to thank you both for being here this evening. It's been
I'm sorry, Sarah, could we let Dr. Bailey, I think he wanted to weigh in.
Oh, of course. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one point. The point that I wanted to make is one that I've been talking about repeatedly towards being redundant. And it's if you have these resources and been sort of generous with them, I think you need to articulate something about the resources. One, I don't know if you have a line item for the kind of research that it's going to, I mean, evidence-based research. If you don't have a line item for it, a dedicated line item, I think that's one way to keep the focus on it. Along with when the new superintendent comes in, how do you keep that superintendent on track? And because I've lived in Oak Park 30 years, and in some schools, when a new superintendent comes in, a program that existed goes away, and all of the research that's been collected goes away. Lastly, I think that sometimes rationality gets you in the weeds, and it's highly overrated. So I believe in research-based mishmash, but I also believe that you have to spice it up with some intuition. For example, we know that a lot of parents in affluent neighborhoods think that equity means that we're going to dumb down the curriculum at this high school. We know that, and you can't talk about that rationally or authoritatively. Like sometimes you have to get down to where people are, and it means going down in that hole with them, in the dark with them, and asking them to go down to that hole with us, because it's a hole we're in, and we need to go down to that hole together. So anyway, that's my figurative language about that. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity of being here.
I know we're really happy that you were willing to join us this evening. Just to sum it up, so my colleagues, I think, have said pretty much everything that needs to be said. But one of the pieces that did stand out for me was the need to have greater articulation between 90 and 97, and to start working at this systemically, right, across all districts. Certainly, if we try to go it alone, which has been our historical model, it's not working. So I would really like to use this as an impetus for more, not finger pointing, but like true collaboration across the districts.
Sarah, I just want to know what's next, because one of the things that I've struggled with, and my time here is winding down, so it probably will not include me, but I echo the comments about we have all the ingredients that we need to make decisions and to understand, but we have to be willing to name. But, as a board, as policy, as, direction and leadership, I will be uncomfortable if this becomes a discussion and then we move on. And I'm getting a little concerned even right now that we're, even I did, thank you so much, as though, wow, now our eyes are open. I've been talking about this report since I read it. I have, the experience of our Black students at this school in particular. Gina just talked about it, graduating, I don't know how many years, when she graduated 10 years ago, and now it is, there has not been our Black students and our Black families are talking about the same things. And so I'm hoping that we can figure out what's next at the board level to continue the conversations that need to be had around, as Dr. Bailey just said, getting down in that hole and figuring out how we have these tough conversations and committing to some process that allows that to happen, and that we are steadfast, because taking our eye off even for a second, or, we lose our conviction when there's noise from those that think equity means, wait a minute, where's my piece of pie? And that's not what we're talking about. So I just would like us to think about that, how we ensured that we didn't have Dr. Bailey and Dr. Spite and Dr. Chandler wait 90 minutes to have this discussion, and then we move on without truly digging in, because it's too vital. We've been talking about this too long. We've been talking about, I know the 8 years I've been on the board, we've been talking about the need for this. And we have the leadership where we're getting traction, but as a board, how do we memorialize and put in place policies that show the type of courage that's needed to be steadfast? So I wanted to put that out there. I don't want us to lose this moment.
Yeah, thank
Can I add something to that, Jackie? Because I think that one of the important pieces also is the education of our community and us being engaged and involved with our community in this. Like Sarah said about the matriculation between 90 and 97 and us, like looking at the overall system as we are like with collaborative for early childhood education. But there is a level of our community engagement and education that is required as well. And maybe just because I'm an educator and I'm accustomed to being in spaces that, folks have to be, that we do some educating, I think that that's going to be a critical piece. So I just thank you, Jackie, for saying that. I wanted to add that like our collective community conversation is going to be critical.
See, could I make a comment that for me is important to put on the table? I don't know, am I muted or not? Let's see.
No, I can hear you.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. I want to emphasize from a perspective of somebody who's been involved in this since the late 80s, in this struggle since the late 80s, how much of an Archimedean lever is represented by detracking the freshman class, this initiative that is still being worked out and still being articulated. It's worth Oak Park River Forest High School throwing all of its energy and all of its intellectual imagination into this struggle to be successful at that. You'll see that in the process of succeeding at detracking, that is providing an expanded opportunity for all students, best things that are best for all students in the freshman year, you will uncover and uncloak many of the problems that has for decades now blocked any progress at all in either achievement or in discipline. The detracking process, that whole struggle, the justification of it, the allocation of resources, the imagining of how to do it effectively is worth every energy that if you're talking about where you go forward, you should stay the course. You started a course. You should stay that course. You will find, if you've read at all, despite the best intentions in chapters 1 and 2, you'll see just how powerfully uncloaking it will be for the freshman curriculum to be detracked, right? So I'm advocating, if I can make any advocacy at all, that you stay the course and you throw all of your energies into that. You will solve many of the problems that has befuddled decades of administrators, decades of superintendents, decades of board members, and decades of members of the community.
Thank you.
Thank you all for a very rich conversation. I just wanted to, share just one more thing, and just as a question, because I think you already got into some of these things. This notion of staying the course kind of takes shape in two different places. When we look before at the problems or the barriers to implementation, staying the course means being able to implement with fidelity, but then also as we looked at the recommendations, they call for institutional investments. And so given the inevitable transfer of district leadership, boards change, superintendents change, I want to leave you with thoughts on how do we begin to institutionalize our current efforts to close this gap.
One thing that I think about is, I know we really, a couple of years ago, one of the most, if not the most recurring discipline was tardiness. And detentions, and failure to show for detentions, this crazy cycle that was really almost existential, or like a Jean-Paul Sartre play, right? This is nuts. And so I feel like there have been strides institutionally to minimize that and do away with some of that, because I feel like that just puts people and students on the 8 ball in a way that is just so unjust and can create such resentment and ill feelings. And I know a year or two ago, there was this assessment or this statistical observation that Black students were much more likely to show up late for class even within the day. And there's how to grapple with that. And so that's, I think, where I heard mentioned earlier, Dr. Spike was referencing the different cultures and how it's, you know, at a meeting we had a few months ago where the meeting doesn't start until anyone gets there, right? It's versus so-and-so's late for the meeting. So to the degree that I think that we could as an institution just not be punitive in that regard, I think that's been a good one example. It's, I don't, you know, no means the only ingredient, but one example of making some progress in that direction. So we haven't had an opportunity for students to be late to class as much this year, which is unfortunate. I'm looking forward to a lot more potential tournaments, but I just put that out there. And if anyone wants to build on that or correct me if I'm wrong in any regard, that just comes to mind. And so one thing that I was thinking about too, in terms of tardiness of addressing this, the students graduating from this high school this year were born in 2003 by and large. And that was from this report. My kids were a couple of months away from being born. This was presented first time. So that's just a heavy thing to think about of the generational, you know, situation. But I do feel like we need to celebrate these steps of progress as well. And I do feel like that's one where, you know, maybe it's a little like fruit, but we plucked it.
Thank you. Others on the board, if anyone just wants to start talking, that's fine.
Let me throw something out. I didn't sort of speak in the first round, but I think one of the things that has always struck me here, and I think I hear some of our speakers talking about in an important way, which is, you know, I think a lot of times we try to do everything. We try to do 20 programs or 30 programs. And yes, the issues are big, but what we don't do is take deep tracking. We don't pick that and implement it with real fidelity and real change and real deep conversations. None of us have the bandwidth to do that 30 times or 30 different programs. We have the bandwidth to do that in 1 or 2 or 3. But 3 programs that really drive change. And sort of reflecting on what Jackie said, you know, where do we leave this, or what do we do? I don't think it's about, you know, commitment to change. I think this board has a ton of commitment, you know, to stay the course and do it. But what we have to have is real focus. And you know, yes, we're very inclusive, and yes, we're going to have conversations with everybody in the community about some of these issues. But in the end, you know, we have to change it, and we have to pick those things, the battles that we have to win.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in?
I just want to leave one other pathway to a real deep and authentic and terrible and wonderful discussion about this. And you know, most of America is about who are the makers and who are the takers, right? Who makes the stuff and who takes the stuff. Our kids are seen as takers. Our kids' parents are seen as takers by the supremacist culture in our country. So, like, we need to irrigate that. We need to interrogate that to the max, because if you're viewed as a taker, you're not respected. There's no one to listen to you. So you can talk all the positivistic, rational, logical, authoritarian stuff. But if you're viewing them from your high ground as a maker, Oh, they're coming to get my stuff. So I just think that even kids could talk about that.
Diamond calls it opportunity hoarding, right?
Board members, anyone want to jump in?
I'll just add that I concur, and the stay the course, Carl, Dr. Spike, that you said earlier is truly, maybe we should emblazon that on t-shirts and read it before we start all of our decision making, because I continue to be struck by how it's when things seem to feel as though it's not fair from a certain perspective. And Dr. Bailey, you more directly talked about that. And, I think a couple of examples of that are in the report. And this is just anecdotal from my own experiences, but I can tell you that, Project Scholar and the clustering of students that was happening stopped, not because it wasn't working, but because it was working. And then families with privilege who had other resources and didn't wanted the same things for their kids, not because it was needed, but they, it was viewed as, well, this is successful. My child should have individual time and those types of things, and discounting that there's so many spaces and my, children as well, spaces for my children where they do have that access to tutors and, those types of needs. So it wasn't being looked at that way. And then with the clustering it was here for my oldest son. And then, by the time my second son and then my daughters were here, I said, well, what do you mean? What happened? And off the record conversations with folks that no longer in the district, but saying a lot of teachers and parents didn't like the fact that they had all white classes. That's not what what Oak Park is supposed to be about. It's about diversity. So it wasn't about what's best for our students, but we went back to the sprinkle method of each class having one or two Black students that, in AP and honors classes, so that it felt diverse, not was diverse, but felt diverse. And so those are the kind of the emotional aspects of this that kind of stick to the heart of bias and that trauma that we inflict on our students, that they are the onlys, but it is for the broader system to feel better. And that from my, vantage point, and it's really why I'm on the board, that's not what educating students is about. It's not to make adults feel better or a community pat itself on the back. So that's the hard work of, are we doing right by our students? And I just continue to think that we have examples, and we have to be honest in reflecting on those and name the issues that have to do with bias, racism, privilege, hoarding of resources, all of those things, and stay the course.
Stay the course indeed, Jackie. The high school has its hands on an Archimedean lever. Stay the course, use it. Use it. Find the courage, use it. Find the intelligence, use it. Find the heart, use it. You have your hands on an Archimedean lever. It will uncloak all of those systemic problems. That lever, that's the one.
And we see it already. Because as soon as we started it, all of the opposition that rose up was clearly like, oh, hey. So I'm so grateful, Dr. Spite and Dr. Bailey and Dr. Chandler, for the ways that we can continue to move this work forward, and for you bringing your wisdom to our group today.
Yeah, I want to say thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I add one more thing too, because Rashida Graham Washington, she mentioned something to us in our session about, and Dr. Bailey, you referenced it also, was that the takers, right? And the idea and the notion that what we bring to what our Black and brown students, what our Black leaders, what we bring versus what we take, and how much more enriched we are when everyone is there. An acknowledgement of what we bring, right? What we actually contribute and the value of who we are and what we bring to it. So thank you for saying that also, Dr. Bailey. I just wanted to mention that because it was part of our other session too.
Thank you. All right, I need a nap now.
Okay, I just want to say that, you know, I thank you all for having this conversation. And, you know, given these things, given what I've heard, you know, I know that we have more to talk about. But I just would just close by saying, as we continue to do the work, you know, we should be thinking about, you know, what it truly takes to stay the course. The 2003 report tells us that this is not new to this district, and despite the best intentions, both tells us that we're not alone in these challenges. But staying the course seems to be necessary for us to make sure we can implement fidelity and that we can institutionalize our efforts. So, if there's any next steps, I appreciate it.
Oh, Lincoln? I'll say Lincoln.
Yes.
I witnessed a recent League of Women Voters forum for the 6 board candidates for Oak Park River Forest District 200 high school board. I witnessed that forum, and all 6 candidates within 1 minute was able to get to some version of yes with respect to whether they supported the initiative for detracking the freshman class. All 6 quibbled in one way or another with some of the detailed wording, but within 1 minute, which is what they had to respond, yes or no, to supporting detracking, all 6 of them, to my eye and ear, said yes. That's good news. You have support in the new board, one way or another. That 6 candidates for the 4 positions open will be surely occupied by 4 candidates that all have said yes to supporting detracking. That's what I heard. That's what I saw.
All right, thank you so much. This conversation is surely not over, but as the hour grows late, I think we will continue the work. Do you feel we're committed? I will just add this one little piece. So, you know, we had these intensive focus groups and surveys in terms of the leadership profile for our new superintendent. And I was encouraged by how much of the community seemed to feel that equity was one of our most important initiatives. That gave me some hope and made me feel as though, you know, we're certainly on the right track and you're headed down a better path, hopefully for a better day. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I am so sorry, give me 1 second after that. So we had 2 lost public comments that did not get read. And so forgive us, that is what we will do now. So Gail is going to read those for us.
The first one is from Fred Arkin. As a community member, I find it appalling that the restructuring of special education comes to compromise of staffing recommendations, and this is occurring absent any communication with faculty and staff. This is a foundational change that will have a significant impact on most vulnerable students that represent 20% of our enrollment. And change of this magnitude and construct must be vetted in public. Input needs to be obtained from all stakeholders, students, and faculty and staff, the administration, institutional community partners, and the community at large. Survey research and comparable data needs to be outlined and presented. There needs to be an open, transparent process. Replacing 4 members of our faculty with 3 administrators without public discourse does not pass the smell test. I find it hard to believe that our current process is not compliant. However, there are multiple paths that can be taken to solve this problem, and the process that suits our district must be transparent for all. The next one is from Monica Sheehan. Our district performs best when issues and challenges are addressed by collaboration of stakeholders, administration, and community. I point to racial and gender equity policies, revision of the student handbook, dress code, disciplinary procedures, restorative justice practices and ID policy, and Imagine. I call on the Board of Education to create a board committee inclusive of all stakeholders to take on this challenge, returning next year to the board with the evidence, research, equity evaluation, and multiple alternative solutions needed for the district to transparently resolve this challenge. I appreciate the opportunity to make a public comment this evening and respectfully request the District 200 board place an action item on this board's general meeting agenda on March 25th. The requested agenda item is a discussion and vote to fund and renovate now the 20 remaining classrooms placed on hold in Project 1. The total cost of the 20 classrooms is $1.4 million. District 200 has an extra $2 million due to the budget surplus resulting from the pandemic that would more than cover the cost of these classroom renovations. This $2 million is in addition to the $90 million that's sitting in the school's cash reserve, and $20 million of it still earmarked for the future facility improvements in Project 2, with its 37 meter by 25-yard pool housed in a 600-seat auditorium. When the board approved this construction of Project 1 in December 2018, it was stated that it contained the school's priority academic and special education facility improvements. There's no logical reason to delay the renovation of this priority classrooms. As the school has the money and the cost of these academic facilities, improvements will only increase as construction costs rise 3 to 4% annually.
Thank you for indulging us.
Our next item under instruction is the 2021-2022 staffing recommendations. Making the presentation of this item is Dr. Roxanna Sanders, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resource, Mr. Greg Johnson, Associate Superintendent, Ms. Shalima Francois-Blue, Executive Director of Special Education, and Mr. Christopher Payne, Director of Educational Technology. Each year in March, the administration provides our Board of Education with the staffing recommendations for each year. The staffing recommendations are grouped into 4 categories based upon the role of the position in each category plays in providing services to our students. They are instruction, which is classroom positions, instructional support, non-classroom positions, non-instructional support positions, and administration. At the conclusion of this presentation, it is recommended that the staffing recommendations move forward for approval at the March 25th Board of Education meeting. This item is in compliance with strategic plan. My mouse went crazy here. Strategic plan priorities 2, 3, and 4, and board goal 1. District policy 3:30 and 6:30.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd Adams. Each year in March, the administration presents to the Board of Education staffing recommendations for the next school year. They are expressed in full-time equivalency of FTE. Just as a reminder, for a teaching position, one FTE equals to teaching 5 periods. This memorandum represents recommendations based upon analysis of the student enrollment projections, course selections, as well as the thorough review of the existing staffing levels and proposals for new positions that were submitted to the executive cabinet. The staffing recommendations are grouped into 4 categories. based on the role each of the positions plays in providing services to all the students. The first one is instructional or classroom positions. I will provide an overview for each of these categories, and then the rationale for new positions will be presented by Ms. Francois Blue and Mrs. Z. So for instructional classroom position, our current allocation of FTE is 222.1. After a thorough review of course proposals and sectioning, we determined that there is a need for additional FTE in some positions, in some divisions, and other divisions are going down in their sections. The overall effect of that is a reduction of 0.9 FTE. Accordingly, we recommend a decrease overall instructional FTE by 0.9 for a total of 221.2 FTE. Instructional support or non-classroom instructional positions currently have an allocation of 51.3 FTE. The recommendation for the next school year is to eliminate 4 special education program chair positions and add 1 position for the faculty senate, which is a psychologist position. The net effect of decreasing instructional support FTE by 3.0. Next category is non-instructional support position. And this is the category that consists of classified professionals, building and grounds employees, food service employees, campus safety employees, and non-affiliated. So currently we have 94 classified professionals, 44 building and grounds employees, 30.5 food service FTE, 27.2 FTE in campus safety, and 45 non-affiliates. After the careful consideration of the staffing needs, we are recommending maintaining the existing staffing levels for all groups of non-instructional support employees, with the exception of classified professionals and non-affiliated. The changes that will be recommended here are based on attrition. So for instance, we will have 2 retirements in special education secretary positions. We are recommending replacing it with 1. Another recommendation is a reallocation of another classified position that becomes vacant due to retirement to a non-affiliate position of the associate web developer. So that's the summary for non-instructional support positions. And the last category is administrators and management. Administrators, individuals who are working under the professional educator license with an administrative endorsement. So currently we have the total FTE of 19.6 for administrators and then 13.0 FTE for management positions that do not require a professional educator license with an administrative endorsement. For the next school year, we are recommending the addition of 4 administrative position licensed positions, 3 in special education and 1 in instructional technology. The overall effect of the proposed changes in terms of financial impact will be total savings of over $200,000. We're estimating them to be $200,000 to $22,000. And now I'll turn it over to Ms. Francois Blue to talk about special education changes.
Thank you, Dr. Sanders, and thank you, board, and thank you, staff and parents for being here tonight. I want to lead into the recommendations for the special education staffing restructuring by saying the one thing that I know I come to work appreciating every day is the understanding that special education is beloved in Oak Park. I think one of the things that's evident tonight is that special education is at the cornerstone of what we do here at Oak Park in education. And it brings a lot of people together under not only times of celebration, but also times of solidarity and stress. I also want to make sure that I add that these are all things that attract me to special education in Oak Park. At the same time, I want to also say that I know that my time in Oak Park as a special education executive director has been short. I've also come to learn and assess by listening to not only my staff, but parents, students, and community members, that there are some things that we need to improve upon and do better. Part of that included me coming to learn that we are fragmented, imbalanced, and inequitable in our structure and practices, which greatly impacts our compliance with state and federal guidelines in special education. The same guidelines that govern how we serve our kids. The great thing is we have the ability to restructure this design to become one that reflects and communicates both internally and externally, a coherent and efficient system that is in compliance with both ISB and IDA guidelines. The recommendations being made today are not to displace, get rid of staff, devalue staff, or disrupt relationships. However, it is about compliance and policy integration and ensuring that every decision that we make is timely and does not disrupt and does not deny any of the services that we're obligated to provide to our diverse learners. It is also about equity and access for every diverse learner of Oak Park or River Forest High School. And when I say a coherent system, I mean the foundation of consistent coordinated components of an organizational structure that can be responsive to the needs of our staff, our colleagues, and most importantly, the kids that we serve day to day. That brings me into the recommendations that I'm making on behalf of the Division of Special Education on the staffing and restructuring in the department. For the non-instructional recommendations Dr. Sanders has already read, I'm going to go into the recommendations of the role of program chair and the function of the role of program chair. Due to the evolving demands in special education, program chair positions are currently part of Faculty Senate bargaining agreement. They have been serving in the capacity of not having teaching responsibilities. These positions, however, do not have the supervisory or administrative authority to perform many tasks necessary to oversee special education programs. And when we say that, that means we've identified several challenges that have been brought to our attention from a compliance standpoint. We do not have the administrative authority in these, the function of the roles to make the commitments of provision of resources and the ability to ensure that these services are set out in the IEP and be implemented. The function of the roles also are unable to assign, supervise, and evaluate their peers and handle sensitive personnel matters in the programs in which the positions chair. They do not also have the authority to communicate to families decisions about the allocation of fiscal resources as it relates to how students, not only the provision of special education resources will be fiscally funded, and also any disciplinary matters that require an administrative oversight. It also does not include, the function of the roles does not include the administrative authority to discuss discipline that is without any input from a district administrator. The other rationale and the recommendations for the restructuring of the function of the role of program chair positions also has to do with being able to make sure that we are not being at a standstill to make decisions when we are in IEP meetings, which goes to the role of the purpose of the elected representation. It does not mean that the people that are currently serving in the role are not doing an effective job. It does mean that we are obligated to ensure that we uphold I uphold the fiduciary responsibility of being in compliance. It is not something that I feel that should be putting the obligation on our parents or our staff to resolve. I do think that as you hire me as the executive director and to assess the needs of the department, I find that to be my responsibility. The recommendation is to ensure that we have 3 positions that have the administrative oversight that's needed at every stage in the special education process. One of the positions is a special education supervisor position, instructional. The position of special education supervisor is needed to provide additional administrative supervision and support with specific focus on the delivery of special education services in the district's instructional programs within the least restrictive environment. The special education supervisor instructional will be charged with supervising and evaluating assigned special education staff, implementing, maintaining, and evaluating services within established guidelines per IDEA and ISB special education rules and regulations. The second position is a special education supervisor off-campus in transition position. The position of special education supervisor in this role is needed to provide additional administrative supervision and support with specific focus on the provision of special education services and off-campus placement, as well as the coordination and case management of student transition back into district programming and services, of course, when deemed appropriate. The special education supervisor will be charged with supervising, evaluating assigned special education staff, and implementing and maintaining evaluating program services within established guidelines of IDEA and ISB special education rules and regulations. The third position is an IEP coordinator position. The position of the IEP coordinator is needed to provide oversight in the area of IEP compliance and facilitation of IEP meetings and alignment with ISB guidelines regarding the delivery of free and appropriate education services for students. The IEP coordinator will train and support IEP team members in developing, implementing, and monitoring IEP goals and individual education programs, including accommodations and supports. The position will coordinate and oversee IEP implementation executed by each case manager within the division. In addition to supervising IEP teams, the IEP coordinator will supervise the scheduling secretary and oversee developing and maintaining a yearly schedule of certain staffings that meet the special education timelines for IDEA. This also is the IEP coordinator, special education supervisor off-campus transition, and special education supervisor instructional. These positions are also being recommended to restructure the imbalanced workloads among the current positions that as they function right now. Or any questions?
Thank you. Dr. Fernandez, how do you suggest that we go about having this conversation since there are so many positions?
In the context, I think there's 2 more from Christopher saying, if you want, we could do it 2 ways. We could have Chris present his and then the board ask questions on the 2, or we can do the questioning now on the special ed restructuring and then move to Christopher.
Board members, do you have a preference for which way to do it?
Can we start with the special ed restructuring?
Sure.
I have questions.
Yes, I just heard some.
So my first question is, first, thank you for the information. My first question is, what were the metrics that were used to determine how this change was made? Was there were there some quantifying factors related to the amount of students, the amount of current administrators, and the amount of workload that the current administrators have that they could not, because what I'm hearing is it sounds as if the one aspect that is not doable by the current program chairs is the evaluatory piece. So I'm just curious what metrics were used for this determination.
Thank you. Some of them, there are a couple of different metrics that were used. One is the workload that you mentioned. Current structure, there is a recognition of the imbalance in the workload amongst the current roles of program chairs. The number of meetings that they attend, the level of decision-making that they have to make currently at these meetings have often caused them to have to reschedule numerous meetings to ensure that there is a decision-making partnership they are included on the provision of special education services. It also, the part of the metrics also includes just the day-to-day operations within the division and also within the roles that they carry, supporting teachers, but at being able to evaluate them, being able to address, not being able to address personnel matters and or student discipline matters, while also running IEP meetings. The other part that we're looking at is an accountability piece to our compliance with IDEA and NSB guidelines, which carries a significant amount of work and responsibility. And right now, the function of those roles, as they stand right now, we do have the day-to-day data that tells us that sometimes we have to intervene in a way where we need to make sure that there may not be a time where there may be a time where we need to intervene, where there's a delay in services, where there's a delay in decision making, where there may be an inability to make a decision at that time, requiring us to reschedule and redo meetings within the division. Those are some of the metrics that we're looking at right now that have been assessed over the years before I even got here. And also since I've been here this past 7-8 months.
Thank you. I have a follow. Thank you. Follow up to that, because what I'm hearing is there's work that they're not able to do. But I'm curious, outside of the evaluatory piece, I know that LEA, so my experience with special ed, and I'm not a special ed teacher, but I am an EL, English language endorsed specialist. And so I've worked closely with our special ed and been part of many an IEP meeting. And in my experience, and have attended some LEA meetings as well. In my experience, those roles can be done. There's that, like, I have watched IEPs be changed in meetings without having to have an administrator approval based on the conversation of the team and the family, right? And the needs of the student and the specialists that are in that room. So I'm not clear on that piece of it. And then I'm also a little confused as to the pieces outside of evaluatory parts. I'm not sure the metric for needing to have three more administrators to do evaluation of these staff. Is there a certain number of staff per evaluation, certain number of administrators per evaluation? And then lastly, I'm curious why, or if actually, I'm wondering if the staff could not be trained in some of these areas that you're saying that they're not currently doing, versus hiring new administrators to do those roles. So it's just my experience is contrary to what you're saying, and I'm also not clear on why the folks that have those positions cannot be trained in those ways outside of the evaluatory piece, which makes sense inside the. cannot evaluate their own collective bargaining unit members. I get that. How many administrators are needed to do this evaluation? What kind of metrics were used to determine that you need 3? Or even if it's just going to be the 1, how many people are they evaluating that another current administrator could not be evaluating?
Thank you for those questions, Board Member Harris. The evaluation component is just one component. It's not all inclusive of the work that has to be done. The other part to your one thing that you mentioned, the training component. The training component and the decision-making that they're currently making is being done. We do have to make sure that we're in compliance with not disrupting any of the services that we provide to our students. That does happen because several times we do have to make sure that there is an administrative, a person of an administrative authority that can make sure that they can intervene and make the decisions that they may not be able to make. The other part is that the function of the role as it stands right now is not one as the program structure role to include the responsibilities that the roles that I just outlined that they can do as they stand right now. For example, an IEP coordinator who is monitoring the compliance of IEP goal development, progress monitoring, discipline, provision of special education services. They also have the administrative authority to go back and say that if a student was not provided those services or not, there was a disruption in those services, there's an accountability component that they have to have. And right now is the positions of a program chair is in alignment with their teachers in the same collective bargaining agreement. They can't make those decisions. It puts them in a very precarious position in order to handle those decisions. So then we do have to step in. And given the fact that there are currently we have over 15%, almost 17% special education students. The number of meetings that we have to have every year, if it was just those one meetings as our annual review conferences or eligibility meetings, that would be it. But oftentimes we have to step in and reschedule meetings because we know that there are sensitive matters that we have to address. And those things become problematic because at that moment, we are stepping outside of our compliance with special education rules and regulations.
So is it possible for you to provide then for us how often that happens, that there's a need for someone to step in, what the metrics would be for that? How many meetings is this happening for? How many students is this happening for? I just feel like there's not enough it's not definitive enough to be warranted at this point to me outside of the evaluation piece. So I would really want to see a lot more specificity. Thank you.
We can definitely provide that.
Any other comments or questions from board members?
Yes, Sarah?
Oh, I'm sorry, Roxanne?
I just wanted to provide a response to the evaluation piece, because the question was, what is the ratio, how many personnel are current administrators? Currently, we have 2 special education administrators. There are 60 licensed individuals in the division that they have to evaluate, that's 30 per piece. Plus, there are also non-certified positions, secretaries that these administrators evaluate. So it's.
I would just ask that members of the audience, now is not the time for interaction with the public. Roxanne?
Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
I have can I just go follow up to that one, Dr. Sanders?
Sure.
Thank you, Sarah. You said 60 people need to be evaluated?
Yes.
And is that 60 special education teachers, or are they 60 special? Well, I'm not clear who those 60 people are. That other administrators,
licensed individuals, so faculty members who operate under a professional educator license. So that's teachers. We have psychologists. We have social workers. We have nurses. So they all fall under faculty members.
And there's no capacity for, who's evaluating these people now? The current administrators don't have the capacity to continue to evaluate these folks?
We can continue to evaluate the staff, that's not the problem. But one of the things that is though, that the part of the problem is, we may not always be in that, working within the classroom environment or observing that classroom environment during that time to see how instruction is provided, to see how students are performing. So we oftentimes definitely, as if we can, get to all of those teachers in a meaningful way. We do that, but it has been very difficult to do that because it pulls us away from other work that we have to make sure they're doing on behalf of supporting the students, supporting the staff, and adhering to the other administrative responsibilities that we have. I want to go back to one of the things that was said earlier today about making sure that this is not about just top-down decision-making. The compliance piece is not about checking off a list to tell us what we're doing wrong. It's also to tell us what we actually need to incorporate into our continuing services to better serve kids. It's not to highlight or punish anyone. It also, part of the conversation, just to go back to earlier comment that was made, that also includes making sure that we are seeing and engaging with our students and building those same relationships. And that is, our feet are on the ground in the building, going from either classroom to classroom or engaging with students and addressing parent concerns as well.
So the program chairs don't currently do that?
That's not what that's not what I'm saying. But I was going back to the evaluation piece and making sure that that is meaningfully done and the attention that takes and the time that takes to get that done.
Yeah, so that's the metric I'm looking for there then. I'm trying to understand the amount of time, I need to know the numbers of how many evaluations, how many administrators. I feel like somehow I'm missing something. Something is missing in this for me. So thank you very much. I will stop now for real because then let other people speak.
I think one of the questions tied to the number of evaluations also depends on where that teacher is on his or her cycle. So sometimes it entails several formative observations before the summative is done. So I just wanted to add that in, and I believe right now, all of the certified licensed individuals is done by Ms. Francois Blue and Ms. Dr. Dick. Does that help?
I still would like a little more specificity. Like I'd really like to see the breakdown on how many are evaluated and how many administrators are needed for that, as well as I'd like to see the issue that these positions are supposed to solve. I would like to know how many times is that occurring that warrants changing these positions.
Thank you. Matt, I feel like you were going to speak.
Tom, you're on deck, Tom, okay? You're, okay, I'll go for you alphabetically. So Dr. Francois Blue, thank you for, explaining the rationale, and a lot of this is really very, there's so many aspects to this, and I heard a bunch, we all heard a bunch of those aspects tonight. I'm going to just ask a very big picture question, and this is something that was raised. Why not wait a year? Is the bottom line. What's the harm, especially since some of these things have been, not in compliance for years technically, but we've made it through as an institution, especially in light of all that we're all going through, particularly with students and families of students. So what is the downside to holding off? And maybe this is the right decision to make, but maybe this is not the right time to make. So what's the reason?
Very good question. And I think it brings me back to the mentioning of data. Over the past years, 2020 has shown us that the data reflects a true impact on the mental health, social and emotional health, the academic progress, the academic engagement and attendance, the feeling of self-worth that school is doable, and the impact it has been having on not only our students and our families, but also on our staff. when you don't feel that you can be empowered to get an already tough job done, and then you layer that or compound that with seeing your students in such a difficult place, it almost makes you feel powerless. And I see that. The other part of it is that special education and program development takes work. And we are in a place, and we do have a sense of urgency to build that continuum in programming and supportive infrastructure so that we can position and support our staff, serve our students, maintain compliance, and make sure we are responsive. When I think of why now, I think of preparedness. I think of support. I think of responsibility to make sure we can serve our kids after our pandemic. We don't know the true impact until our babies are in seats. And when they are in seats, we need to be able to respond. If we wait a year, we're saying 2021 didn't happen, and we cannot afford to do that.
Okay, thanks for that insight. What I don't know is, I heard pretty unanimous opposition from people who are on your staff and who are in the trenches day to day for years. And so that, to me, there's a compelling, even if you're right, and I don't presume to know, this is not, not my world at all. But I'm just concerned about all that I heard, that there's just there's so many concerns and so much stress happening that, so I'm just letting you know that's my struggle, is in terms of whether to approve this kind of request in a couple of weeks. I am not close to being there because of what I've heard. And I know, having covered meetings like this for a long time in my career, I know sometimes you hear a few people speak and there's thousands at home who are content, and so it's a skewed thing. But these, this is different in my view. So I need to hear more from you to be swayed to where you're coming from, just being transparent with you.
And I definitely can understand that. And I know that one thing that is definitely important is that change right now, I truly understand can be difficult. Because we're already dealing with being uncertain about each day what school will look like. I totally understand that. I also will say that anytime that you have a change where someone feels like this will be a loss, I understand what that means. I also at the same time understand what it means when I hear that this has been a problem for years. This has been going on since I got here. We've been going through this so long and so much. This is what we know. When a system has not addressed this system, the structure of special education right now, and this board structure has not addressed problems that have continued to go on year to year, that means that when it comes to serving our kids, serving our parents, we're trying to exist within a system that is not working for them. And I definitely understand that any transition right now is going to have to be a very closely supported transition. The input of staff, the input of students, the input of parents, I definitely value that and want their input. What will these roles, what is work of the people in these roles? What does that mean? So I did not want to be preemptive and say, give me your input now, given that we may not move forward with this. But if we do move forward with this, that stakeholder input in each process step moving forward is going to be critical. But I do know that in the event that anything is approved, a supportive transition process has to occur, and that does occur. My first listen, what do you need this to look like?
Thank you. I'll turn over to whoever else has questions. Thank you.
My question is that I heard repeated references to the current the incumbents as what was it? Instructional coaches. So my question is that part of, that surprised me, I guess, but I'm not that close to that specific role. Is that part of what is in the current role, and where does instructional coaching fit in within the special ed umbrella?
So if I think I hear what you're saying is what is the instructional coaching for teachers play a role? How does that play a role within the current positions now? And how will they continue to? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, is it in the current job requirement, and is it something, what will it be in the new structure?
So I'm sorry, maybe I just should clarify, the terminology that I used was not instructional coach. It was instructional support position, which is opposed to classroom position. So it's still within the faculty senate, it's instructional support. We have a number of positions that are not in the classroom, but they provide support to students. Like, for example, psychologists, social workers, these are instructional support positions.
But just so that I'm clear, that when I'm talking, I didn't hear it from you. I'm referring to what was said during repeated public comment. There were repeated references to instructional coach. So
I think that was a reference, so the district has people who have been identified specifically as instructional coaches. I think what you heard tonight from the various people who spoke is that they see the program chair as a coach for them, helping them to meet their needs and get their handled. Not that they are the identified instructional coaches for the district. They are some of the members of the SPED staff.
thank you.
I have a question. Is it Sarah? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm curious, Ms. Francois Blue, you said that this has been an issue or concerns that you inherited for the most part. I'm paraphrasing. And so it sounds as though there is information, data to support this decision that perhaps has not been shared with the board. Because I share the sentiment of, I feel like there's something that's here that some people know what it is, and the board is being asked to render a decision without having that context or that data. So I would appreciate that. I also just wanted to ask the program chairs, these three areas the programs are not being eliminated, correct?
No programs have been, no programs.
Okay, so what will they look like moving forward? And that's one piece. And then the other piece is how many out of the entire special ed department, how many students are able to access these programs?
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
When, your question about the programs are not being eliminated. You asked the question about how will they function. Are you talking about how the program functions, or the people, the position being proposed?
I'm asking because there seems to be some confusion that, advocating for specific staff members who are these program chairs, that they're being removed from the school, that the elimination of these positions means the elimination of the work. So I just am trying to make sure that there's clarity on that piece, that these programs are continuing and there will be oversight and staff and all of those things. So I'm just trying to understand how where the misconception is coming up that the elimination of these, the restructuring of these positions means some harm to the existence of the programs.
I understand what you're saying, that's exactly what you're saying, Dr. Moore. So there is some clarification to be made. No programs are being eliminated. No, we're not eliminating staff. We are looking at the role and the function of the role, and that is going to be restructured and no longer exist. The function of the role. The one thing that I also wanted to make sure that I go back to in terms of the additional information that I definitely can provide to the board is that when we talk about the structure of the administrative team, we have to be able to make sure we can communicate not only to internally, to our internal stakeholders and also to our external stakeholders. What do each of these roles mean and what will people be doing? Right now, our points of contact or line of support is very, very fragmented and blurred. Sometimes we don't know who will be that point of contact or who should I go to and who's gonna make this decision. Every day I see communication from parents who are asking, who do I need to go to who can give me this decision and make this right for me? And those are the things that we're trying to make sure that we bring into a cohesive structure so that we can be effective in how we're serving our students and families. We do have I do have the special education organizational structure that I can share. It should be, it's also in the board packet, which shows how the different roles and the functions of those roles will be delineated. The work within those roles will be delineated. There's several things that had to be examined, which is also how do you balance the number of meetings that people have, but also how do you shift some of those responsibilities to someone else so that there is a balance and structure of support for each role that each person plays. The other part is the day-to-day support. So who will rotate and be that line of support participant each day for every kid in the building. We want to make sure that the division in special education has a leadership structure that can provide that. So there are a number of things, there are a number of factors and metrics of data that I can provide as to strengthen and further that rationale for this research.
So it sounds as though, and I don't want to put words, I'll just ask the question. Is this an attempt to provide access to more special ed students of the services and the advocacy and decisions that need to ensure they're getting the proper resources that is not occurring now?
I will say that it is not occurring in an equitable way that we would like to see it occur. It's not.
And so when you say, I need us to talk, so I know you're, and perhaps it's better for Dr. Pruitt-Adams to address, given the fact that it predates you. What is the equity issue? What are we talking about?
The issue that predates Ms. Francois Blue really wasn't so much the equity of students having access. It is our understanding that there were the delay in the delivery of services oftentimes happened because the program chairs could not make the formal decisions that needed to be made. And so oftentimes meetings had to be rescheduled until the director could be in that meeting to make that decision.
And I add to that, Dr. Pruitt. When you talk, Dr. Moore, when you ask pretty clearly what also is the equity issue. Our Q1 review of grades received for our special education students revealed that we had assigned grades of Fs to special education students in excess of 60%. That is not a position, that is not something that right now we can say the function and the role of a program chair can address. An administrator can only address the practice of instruction and the obligation of adhering to compliance in special education as it relates to how do you grade, how do you accommodate, how do you differentiate instruction, how do you apply culturally responsive instructional practices. That is almost something that an administrator can, that's what.
Coaches do that, but you said you had instructional coaches. Don't instructional coaches do that as well? Instructional coaches coach educators in all of those practices as well?
Instructional coaches do that, but specialists in special education have to be those instructional coaches to augment that as well. So we don't, I want to make sure that I'm referencing examples of that issue.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand, because if instructional coaches do that, if we've had them, some of them mention that they consider these program chairs to be coaches to them, and I think that you said that, or someone said that they consider them to be coaches for them. I'm trying to understand.
Gina, I'm sorry, but I think my understanding, and I'm just sorry, because it's a way to ask two questions at once. The reference to coaching, was that advocacy for families, or was that for teachers? When coaches were.
And teachers. That's what I said to me, because that they're not instructional coaches. I think I want to make sure we're talking about the right thing. So, and I also just wanted to make sure that I go back to the instructional coach piece as separate, because I think that has came up. That we don't want to work in isolation and say it is left up to one person. Special education is something that we have to make sure that we are being very, very clear that it is a specialized service based on the impact of the student's disability and what they need. That may mean that one person in a separate division whose role is to be an instructional coach, separate from coaching and supporting kids and staff. That doesn't mean they hold that sole responsibility on their own. That is the responsibility of the special education leadership structure to ensure that that's being done. And that's the administrative oversight piece that we're referencing, which is why we spend so much time thinking, can we make these roles work? Can they function in this way? Will we be putting them in a position where they are at odds with their peers if we do that? Those are all additional factors that has played a part in making these administrative positions. And I also want to just underscore administrative positions that are opportunities, The current people that are in the program chair roles. I don't think we mentioned that.
Jackie, I don't know if you had any follow-up questions, or if Ralph or Craig would have any.
My only follow-up, and I want to keep it really brief, is to pile on what Gina said. I think we need more information, and I think it'd be nice to know in a written format, here are the compliance issues we think we're cleaning up. Here's the problem we identified in the pre-existing system. Here's why these positions solve that problem. Here's why that's better than the existing structure. You know, I would like to know Gina laid it out much better than I am, but I kind of want to see the why and the response to the why, all in one written format so that I can understand it, because frankly, I don't, as currently presented.
If I could just add to what Ralph said, I mean, I was thinking for me visually, we're different types of learners. And so for me, it would be helpful to see how it's done now, step by step of the journey of a student from 8th grade coming in for orientation and so on, all the way through to the programs that are off campus, you know, and into their early 20s, right? And this is how it's been, and this is, and maybe not every single block in this sequence is affected as much as the other, of course, but where's the logjam, where's the flaws currently, and what would the new approach do to help remedy that? And if there's an offsetting, you know, what's lost in that process, and maybe what's lost is inefficiency and just people having to work crazy hours, you know, on the staff, You know what I mean? So that's me, and maybe that's not a realistic ask on my part, but that'll help me to get it, because this is all, it's a foreign language to me. So where, to whatever degree that can come back for me and maybe for all of us. And if you need me to clarify this in any way, let me know.
You can do that.
Thank you.
You can do
Ralph, I don't know if you have any other point you want to raise. No, okay. Right.
Yeah, thank you for all the level of detail, the articulation that you put into this. And to me, it's clear that you have thought deeply about this topic. I have two things. One question. Is there any reason that the current program chairs cannot apply for these positions? There's no reason. So if they chose to do that, they could do that. And granted, they would have lots of relationships, which we heard about today, and lots of relationships with the community that would be helpful to them. So I guess the second comment is, you know, I know you're pulling up a lot of data for other board members. I don't need that data. Board work is, from my view, trying to figure out, are we making a good decision? It's not about getting down into that details.
So I think I'm sort of the opposite spectrum from Matt in that I have a kid, a second, who is in special ed, and Fawn is certainly known well by his parents and beloved, right? So I just want to be really clear to everyone, which I think you've articulated well. This isn't about the people in the positions, right? This is about a structural change, an organizational change. Whereas having people in those positions makes that tough, right? But the place where I'm at is sort of, I think, a little bit different from my colleagues. My concern really is around what replaces this, right? Like how, you know, these program chairs are clearly filling a need. You know, we've heard that from parents. It sounds like they're serving sort of an ombudsperson role. So like what replaces that? I don't think that we've had, I don't think we know, right? Like, I'm not sure we've had that conversation with families, with, you know, with the stakeholders to kind of figure out how to fill that breach, because there would undoubtedly be one for these families. And so I heard you say that that was something that you wanted to address once we kind of knew what was going to happen. But I feel like that needs to be the first question, right? And so that's where I am with this position. I'm not a no, but I do think I'm in that right now. So.
I have a follow-up question to Craig's question, just real quick. Craig's question was about could they currently apply to be an administrator? You need a credential. Are you saying that they all have the credentials to, like, they don't have to go seek another credential in order to apply for that position, right?
They all can apply for the position if they have, and I don't want to be speaking on someone's professional credentials out of turn, but they have the credential of the Type 75. There are additional qualifications and credentials that are outlined in each of the proposed job descriptions, but that doesn't mean that it negates them from applying.
Right. Thank you. So I just want to make sure, so they can apply, but it's not like they can, that they're automatically qualified for those positions right now. There would be other requirements that would be necessary. I just want to make that clarification.
Yes, because of the change in the roles.
Yeah, thank you.
Gina, to the best of my knowledge, all four program chairs hold an administrative endorsement that would qualify them for the position. That would be the minimum legal requirement. That and I just wanted to add, like we were talking a lot about individuals today. I completely agree with everything that was said in all the public comments. These are wonderful individuals. We never doubted their quality of work. This is not about them. It's about by nature of how this position is structured, they're at disadvantage because they cannot make the decision that is required at the IEP meeting. They have to oftentimes call for an administrator, and that's what delays services going through.
I'm confused now. Like, so I know I keep coming back with questions, but I'm confused now because you said they all have that administrator's license, but they can't make those decisions. So I'm misunderstanding then the technicality behind that.
You have to work under administrative endorsement. The fact that they have it doesn't mean that they can use it. You have to be in an administrative position in order to be able to utilize administrative endorsement.
They technically